Warrior Lord, Chapter 1006 The Weird Internal State of Gisadinum's Skulls. She, TTT. Gustav cursed under his breath before his eyelids closed completely and he fell unconscious. His body retained its glow after he had fallen face down within the head of the Gisadinum. Yaya. Kyrar. Hio. Outside the Gisadinum's head, battle cries rang out as the MBO resumed their fight against the infected. Every single person had scorch marks on different parts of their bodies due to Gustav's Yarki before he retracted it. Some infected had even been scorched nearly to ashes since some of them didn't have bodies that were as sturdy as that of the MBO. Gradier Xanatus flew across the battlefield, occasionally hurling down attacks as he charged forward. Gustav! He yelled out as he flew across the air while looking down. All he could see from up here was the devastation caused by the battle between Gustav and the Gisadinum. Earth had split to the point where one would wonder if this was a battle between two beta-ranked. There were craters all over the place that extended to even the borders of Gildian City behind. Both infected and MBO officers had lost their lives due to the fight between these two, and even the wall that were erected around the city had nearly been torn down completely. Everyone witnessed these two put everyone in a state where they were unable to move throughout the duration of their battle. Gustav, who was supposed to be an Echo-ranked battled with a mixed breed, was so powerful in the past, and had its power even boosted by the infection, yet he still came out on top. An infected mixed breed that was beyond level 100, yet an Echo-ranked mixed blood won against it, whereas Kilo and Delta-ranked mixed bloods were unable to intervene. Gradier Xanatus had so many unanswered questions running through his mind, and one of them involved how Gustav was able to use the same type of power Gisadinum was mostly feared for, and even used it in a more powerful state. However, even if he had these questions, he knew he would never be able to get any answers if Gustav remains missing. The infected were not going to wait or give them chance to do a proper search, so Gradier Xanatus took it upon himself to find Gustav. The battle was won, but Gradier Xanatus feared it was not without a cost, especially after Gustav's presence disappeared the moment Gisadinum met his end. The female officer that had initially joined them had gone back to battling the infected. Just because Gisadinum had been unexpectedly taken care of didn't mean the fight was over. Gisadinum was just one part of the threat. The other part was not any less dangerous since there were more than 6 million infected pushing their way forward in a bid to overrun the city. Gustav! Gradier Xanatus yelled out once more as he headed towards the corpse of the Gisadinum. He suddenly recalled something as he closed in on the gigantic corpse in the distance. The source of this content is F.O. The infected come back to life if their bodies are not properly gotten rid of, he said internally before flying and landing on the head of the corpse. We need to completely disintegrate its body. Gradier Xanatus yelled out to those on the wall. The officers on the walls with abilities that were capable of completely getting rid of Gisadinum's body began to jump down from the wall. As Gradier moved around its head area, he noticed that there was a glow coming from the hole that was created in Gisadinum's forehead. Everyone knew the cause of this hole was Gustav's killing blow, but no one knew he never came out of it. Gustav? Gradier Xanatus spotted the unconscious figure laying within the massive hole on the forehead of the creature. Ashy goo was still pouring out of the forehead like a fountain, and some flowed over Gustav as his glowing unconscious body just laid there. Gradier Xanatus quickly moved in and tried to retrieve Gustav's glowing unconscious body. Warrior lore. He lifted Gustav over his shoulder and headed out the hole, but then he noticed he was unable to get past the entry point. What is happening? He wondered out loud as he felt himself getting stopped by an invisible force. Gradier Xanatus put Gustav down and swung his palm forward. He had expected to get stopped by the invisible force, but this time his hand moved past the entry point freely. A look of confoundment appeared on Gradier Xanatus' face as he picked Gustav up once more and tried to make his way out. Zoom! He was stopped by the invisible force once more. Gradier Xanatus placed Gustav's glowing body down once more, and the same result as earlier repeated itself. Unfortunately, no matter how much Gradier Xanatus tried to get Gustav's body out of the creature's head, it was to no avail. New novel chapters are published on FreeWeb. Velcom. He had even tried creating another exit point, but it brought about the same results. At this point, Gradier Xanatus was sure that something was going on, and he attributed it to the glow on Gustav's body. He noticed that as time passed, Gustav's unconscious body was crystallizing with golden shards. Whatever is happening to him right now, I'm sure it's not negative, Gradier Xanatus could tell as he scrutinized Gustav's frame. He decided to move out at this point. Do not touch the creature till the glow there has dimmed. After it does, retrieve Officer Crimson's body and keep him somewhere safe, Gradier Xanatus voiced out before turning around to head back into the battlefield. The 9 officers that had just dropped from the wall to take care of this task had looks of confusion on their faces as Gradier Xanatus moved further away from here. However, a command was a command, and they had no right to question it at such a crucial moment when they knew Gradier Xanatus had to busy himself with preventing the infected from breaching the wall. MBO camp in a grassy, filled field void of people. I must say you did a splendid job. Chapter 1007. The gang's determination. A greenish-looking crystal floated in front of a young teenage boy with black curly hair as it glowed repeatedly while a masculine voice was projected from it. I almost died, Indrik voiced out in response. True, but you did a splendid job regardless, Fusarius stated once more. Acquiring the vest makes 20% of your mission complete. It's a huge leap, Fusarius added. I sensed so much power in the vest. Are you sure the dimension you locked it away and will be able to prevent its energy from seeping out? Indrik inquired with a slightly worried look. It will keep it sealed in the meantime. The only thing you should be worried about is getting rid of its residue energy lingering around you. That could potentially cause you to be in great danger, Fusarius warned. Why so? Indrik questioned. The lingering residue energy could attract entities from all over the world that have all longed to acquire the vest of Dumbledore. A lot of them wield power beyond your comprehension, but locating the vest always eluded them. If I wasn't helping, you would have gotten lost in universe trying to find the vest, Fusarius explained. On the bright side, they won't try infiltrating Earth even if they senses as Earth is a formidable force to behold, but the moment you leave this planet with the lingering energy still surrounding you, you place a target on your back and trust me, these mad creatures will not hesitate to chase you to the ends of the universe just to make sure they acquired the vest, he added. Indrik nodded with a look of understanding as he heard this. How do I get rid of the energy? Indrik proceeded to ask. In another part of the MBO camp, a group of 9 could be seen standing together in a garden-like area as they discussed. The ISOP training is starting in 2 months, and we're getting out of camp in a month's time, Angie voiced with a contemplative look. Did every single one of us manage to reduce our term here in camp? Elevra questioned. Yes, EE answered as he threw a glance at every one of them before smiling. You'll be showing them who's boss, he added. So every one of us will get to complete a mission at the very least before ISOP begins, Eldris pointed out. That's great. Gustav has already gotten way ahead of us in MBO ranks. We have to close in the gap as soon as possible, Falco stated. My rival is just too powerful. I will give my all to surpass him or close in the gap, Rhea said with a look of determination. Come on guys, let's show the world that this generation of mixed blood will be taking over in every aspect, Timmy added. I can't wait, whatever it takes to be at Gustav's side, Vera said with a dreamy look causing Angie to shoot her an intense glare. Vera didn't care about that and feigned nonchalance even after noticing that. We won't be able to achieve any of that if we don't increase our rank and get even more powerful, Matilda voiced out. Gustav is always working hard and it works for him, so we have to work twice, no thrice, no 4 times as hard if we ever have any hope of coming close to his level of strength, Glade spoke this time. Hey, she might be a puppet but she's right, E stated. The source of this content is F.O. E. They all voiced out at the same time as they stared at him. What? Did I say something wrong? E asked with an innocent expression. Don't say that out loud, Falco whispered. Anyways, I'm suggesting a joint training. No breaks for the next month. Eldris broke the brief silence caused after Glade stared at everyone with a confused expression. We're going to be pushing ourselves beyond our limits, Eldris added. Everyone had a look of determination as they heard that and began agreeing to the joint training, Elevra included even though she had already achieved the Echo rank. Flicker, flicker, flicker. Within what looked like a hospital ward, The lights suddenly began flickering as a bed with a patient on it started to float. "Get a doctor down here," one of the nurses yelled through a communication device as she sighted this scene. The person on the bed had their eyes closed, but their hand and toes fingers would occasionally make small movements. "Third time in the last 3 days, he needs another shot," the nurse yelled out through the communication device once more. How is it that even after moving him into the special suppressive room, he is still able to do this? "I have no idea, just get down here," the nurse voiced out in response. GBBHHHLLHHHBBBLLL. New novel chapters are published on FreeWeb. Oh, Velcom. The entire vicinity began trembling as the bed in this ward floated further upwards, and flickering lights flickered with even more intensity. "Be quick if you don't want him destroying the entire building in his sleep," the nurse yelled out once more as the force from this incident began pushing her backwards, causing her uniform to bloat due to wind. In a few moments, a doctor came dashing in with a massive instrument in his hands that was almost too heavy for him to carry. 2 other male nurses came in with him and tried assisting as he moved this instrument in the direction of the floating bed. A part of the floor popped out and began lifting them to the height this unconscious patient had attained. "Open his mouth," the doctor yelled to one of the nurses as they moved the instrument closer. The instrument, which looked like a 4 feet large funnel, was about to open up beneath and empty its contents in the mouth of this patient. At the last second, the patient suddenly opened his eyes. "Grab." The doctor and nurses displayed a startled expression as he grabbed hold of the instrument and stopped it from moving forward. "What are you doing?" he asked as he slowly sat up. "I'm gonna have to ask you to return to the medical center now," the man with the ice cube-like face voiced out. Why?" Gustav said while raising an eyebrow. He still had a patient uniform on, so his clothes kept flapping due to the wind. "Higher up orders. They'll have to consider you in hostile if you refuse to adhere," the officer voiced out as he suddenly unleashed his bloodline energy. A kilo ranked, Gustav noticed instantly. "I refuse. Now be good and tell me what city this is," Gustav stated with a nonchalant tone. New novel chapters are published on FreeWeb. Oh, Velcom. They'll have to use force to return you to the medical center now, the officer said with a serious tone. "You know what? Never mind. I'll just get out of here myself," Gustav said as he reached out to touch his left wrist. My dimensional bracelet," Gustav muttered as he noticed his dimensional bracelet was no longer strapped to his left wrist. "Your possessions were taken away. Now will you come with me, or do I have to use force?" the officer asked once more. Gustav stood there with a stupefied expression. "How did they get it off?" "My storage device is missing too, along with the jewel." Gustav made a low sigh as he placed 2 fingers on his forehead. "Where are they?" Gustav asked. "The MBO Tower in Plankton City. It's at 4,000 miles east from here," the officer said with a tone that depicted there was nothing Gustav could do other than just comply. 4,000 miles east from here? "Ah, so this is Charlie City," Gustav said with a look of understanding. "How did you?" The officer was about to ask how Gustav figured it out, since he already mentioned he had no idea where they were. "You practically revealed it. Anyone with a brain and knowledge would be able to figure it out," Gustav responded while shrugging. "I'm pretty sure not just anyone would figure that out from the distance revealed." The officer wanted to say this out loud, but kept quiet. Chapter 1009. You should have brought backup. "So they asked you to bring me back to the medical facility?" "Yes." "All by yourself?" "Yes." "And how do you intend to do that?" Where's your backup?" "I don't need any backup." "Okay, get lost. Follow current novels on FreeWeb. OVL. Gustav turned around to leave at this point. "Stop!" the officer yelled as he pushed his palm forward. A burst of misty blue energy slammed into Gustav from behind, freezing him in place. "I'm taking you back whether you like it or not," he said after freezing Gustav in place and began to step forward. "No," Gustav stated as he regained control of his movement and turned around. The eyes of the officer widened in shock as he prepared to send out another attack. "Tremble." Fwyi, a burst of whitish energy was sent forth from Gustav as he voiced out. The officer suddenly felt overwhelmed with an indescribable feeling as his knees weakened. Plop. He fell to his knees and nearly bowed as well as he stared at Gustav with a look of disbelief and confusion. "You should have brought backup," Gustav stated before turning towards the east. "Lightning Blitz has been activated." The instant he leapt into the air, he turned into a lightning streak. Thrice. The streak bolted across the air, and he disappeared instantly. A few minutes later, the officer had regained control of his body and was in the presence of 4 other officers on the same rooftop. "What? You lost him?" One of them voiced out with a furious tone. "He was too strong. He defeated me with 1 word," the Ice Cube-headed officer said with a crestfallen look. "You couldn't stop an Echo-ranked mixed blood who has only been an officer for a few months after your years of experience? You're gonna make us look bad now," the others voiced with looks of disappointment. "We have to find him now. Which direction is he headed in?" Another one of them asked. "I don't think it matters if we go after him," the Ice Cube-headed officer said. "Huh? Why?" One of them asked. "He's not running away. He's headed to the tower in Plankton City," the Ice Cube-headed officer stated. "And how do you know this?" The other one asked once more. "He wants to get his things. The tower is always swarming with officers, so they can take care of him themselves," the Ice Cube-headed officer replied. "Even if you're correct, we still have to go after him to make sure he doesn't harm anyone." Forhush. A whitish line tore through the air as a figure flew across the skies with immense speed. "I've never tried travel by flight. I mean, I have, but that was in an aircraft. It's truly interesting when I'm flying with my own power," Gustav said internally as his figure kept parting the clouds due to his speed. "Well, at least now you can keep it up since you have a lot of energy, and you're not going very far," the system responded. "4,000 miles is pretty far, though," Gustav replied internally. "Not as far as touring across the entire Earth," the system voiced. "Gustav, fair point. Lightning Blitz has been activated. ZHRRRHHH." Gustav crossed another 600,000 feet in an instant as he activated Lightning Blitz. The cooldown had ended, so he could activate it 4 more times before it went into cooldown mode again. This would shorten the distance by another 500 miles. Gustav estimated that he should arrive back in Plankton City in about 30 to 40 minutes' time. He had left a huge gap between himself and the officers chasing from behind. "What exactly happened when I was asleep? Did I manage to absorb the cosmic superiority completely?" Gustav asked internally. "What do you think?" The system answered with a question. "I feel more energized than before, more powerful. It's an odd feeling that I can quite describe." Gustav's face shone with a contemplative expression as he mentioned. "To a certain extent you feel like reality can bend to your will?" The system stated. "Yeah, something like that," Gustav confirmed. It has begun," the system chuckled as it stated. What has begun?" The MBO tower, stand down." A man in a red-colored MBO outfit commanded through a communication channel. Are you sure, sir?" They stated that he might still be unstable and needs to be examined for a few more days before he is released. The person on the other end of the communication questioned. "It doesn't matter. He is coming here, so stand down." Understood. "Sir Xanatus," the person on the other end voiced as the dialogue ended. Gradier Xanatus stood in a boardroom with a few other officers having a meeting. "And you're sure he won't endanger the lives of anyone?" One of the officers here, who was dressed in a high-ranking outfit, questioned. What better place for him to be than in the presence of other officers who are much stronger and can place him under control if anything goes wrong? Gradier Xanatus said with a casual but respectful bearing. I see your point. All right, Major Gradier Xanatus, but you will take the blame if anything goes wrong." The generals accepted for Gradier Xanatus' suggestion to not place Gustav in any isolation. The generals had no idea that Gradier Xanatus was mostly doing this because it was close to impossible to keep Gustav in a place he didn't want to be, and the whole situation could end up getting messy, so he had to take care of things on his own end. Gradier Xanatus sighed in relief after all the generals left the boardroom. An holographic footage appeared in his line of sight afterwards. It displayed an angle of a recording where Gustav said a word and caused the other officers' knees to buckle. "Get rid of this footage," he commanded. 40 minutes later, welcome back. Gradier Xanatus voiced with a smile as a young man with dirty blonde hair walked into the boardroom clad in a patient outfit. "Gradier Xanatus, you're alive." A smile appeared on Gustav's face as he walked towards Gradier Xanthus with 2 officers by his side. Chapter 1010 Trip Down Memory Lanes. Gradier Xanthus, you're alive. A smile appeared on Gustav's face as he walked towards Gradier Xanthus with 2 officers by his side. The officers besides him had solemn expressions as they stood by Gustav's side like they were escorting a prisoner. Leave us, Gradier Xanthus said to the officers. They nodded with respectful look before walking out of the boardroom. Gustav took a seat in front of Gradier Xanthus before speaking. Everyone has their guard up so much around me. Was it that bad when I was unconscious? Gustav questioned. Yes, Gradier Xanthus answered bluntly before leaning on the side of the massive table. Follow current novels on FreeWeb. OVL.com. Your occasional energy disruption was on a seismic scale and even affected the battle during the fight against the infected, he added. I guess it must have caused more damage than I expected, Gustav said while holding his chin. Anyway, since I'm back now, everything is in control, Gustav added. I don't doubt that, but the higher-ups do so in the meantime. Don't go anywhere without me. They want me babysitting you to make sure no accidents happen. This was the bargain for your freedom, Gradier Xanthus pointed out. For how long? Gustav inquired. Till they've ascertained that you're stable and not dangerous to others, Gradier Xanthus replied. Gustav had a slightly troubled expression as he heard this. On the bright side, Gradier Xanthus was someone he was comfortable with, or he would have already threw tantrums. Don't worry, it won't be for long, but you have to be careful about how you use some of your abilities in public. You need to stay out of their eyes for now, Gradier Xanthus voiced out, hinting at the ability Gustav had used to put the kilo-ranked officer on his knees effortlessly. Sure, my possessions. I want them back, Gustav demanded. You will get them back, but first, you mind telling me what happened on the battlefield 3 days back? Gradier Xanthus' face shone a look of curiosity as he voiced out. Don't you have something to tell me first? How did the battle end? Gustav threw in this question as he pedaled back on his seat. Okay, well, trade answers. Gradier Xanthus responded. Gradier Xanthus went on to narrate everything that happened on the battlefield after Gustav lost consciousness. He added the part where he couldn't get Gustav out of Gisadinum's head for over 3 hours and had to leave him there due to the weird golden glow phenomenon. He went on to explain that it was only after 2 more hours that the officers managed to get him out and rid the place of Gisadinum's corpse. I could have stolen its bloodline too. What a waste, Gustav thought internally as Gradier Xanthus got to this point. Gradier Xanthus went on to mention how the numbers of MBO officers continued to dwindle without any hope of getting more reinforcements till the next 24 hours. He knew they would all be dead before then, so they kept trying to come up with a solution to all this. The MBO officers were running out of bloodline energy, AI droids were getting destroyed, and even the mixed blood machines were starting to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of infected in the vicinity. Despite Gustav managing to get rid of Gisadinum, it was a losing battle. After losing more than 70% of their forces, there were still over 4 million infected charging through. Red Shadow was found half dead, Gradier Xanthus stated. How is he now? Gustav asked with a look of concern. He is fine. Just like you, he was taken to a medical center to get treatment, and he is absolutely okay right now. He regained consciousness 2 days ago and is out of the hospital, Gradier Xanthus revealed. That's great. Gustav let out a sigh of relief. The same can't be said about the officer who found him. Gradier Xanthus had a sour look as he got to this point. The young officer? Fola? Gustav asked with a slightly worried look. Yes. Officer Fola made a sacrifice on that day after bringing Red Shadow back. Gradier Xanthus had a reminiscing look as he voiced out. We're almost out of comrades. They're close to breaching the east wall. A voice was heard on the communication channel. We can't send anyone in the meantime. We're barely holding on here too. Gradier Xanthus responded with a worried tone as he heard this. We're going to be done for in a few. Kyre. Screams of agony rang from the communication channel along with ripping sounds. Officer Fola had just dropped Red Shadow's bloodied and unconscious body at Gradier Xanthus' feet. He'll go, Officer Fola said as his body glowed up. Grab. You don't fool me. I know you're almost out of energy, Gradier Xanatus voiced out after grabbing hold of Officer Fola's arm. "Ilgo, you stay here," Gradier Xanatus voiced out. "We really don't have time for this argument, sir. Everyone here needs you. You have to remain in command and pull everyone together. Your death will not help anyone," Officer Fola said with a tone of defiance before jumping into the air. Whoosh! He flew speedily across the air before Gradier Xanatus could respond. Fola flew towards the east side, and just as they mentioned, some infect had began climbing up the walls. They barely had officers left in this area. He began attacking the infect he spotted upon getting here. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rang out as he used the last bit of his energy to join them in repelling the infect here. HNNGHH. An ashy goose slammed into his side while in mid-air, causing him to fall. The infected who had sent forth this attack was blasted to pieces by another officer. Fola breathed in and out profusely as he stared at the large number of infected still charging towards the wall from up ahead. They had covered the entire area to the point where nothing else could be seen besides these ashy-skinned zombies that had refused to die. Chapter 10:11 The Sacrifice. "I'm out of energy. I have to use it," Fola thought. Even though it won't be enough to eradicate them all, it would give them enough breathing space. He began charging towards the ranks of infected at this point. "Everyone head back to the wall," he yelled out as he charged at them. "Dash, what are you doing? Dash, where are you going?" The officers here yelled out as they spotted him running towards the infected. "Just do it. Take refuge on the wall," he yelled out once again as his body began to glow up. The officers stared with looks of confusion and disbelief, but no one could stop him now. He had already leapt into the ranks of infect and had himself surrounded by them. Follow current novels on freeweb, OVL.com. With every passing second, his entire body glowed even more brighter. "Take refuge, everyone," one of the officers shouted out as he realized what Officer Fola might be up to. Fola leapt into the air once more, drawing the attention of the infected further backwards as he distanced himself from the wall. "Follow me, you fuckers," he yelled out as his entire body glowed with so much purple light his skin began to melt. After he felt he had left enough distance between him and the wall, he finally let go of the energy he had been building up. "Die." A wry smile appeared on his face at this moment. Boom. A loud explosion rang out as purplish waves of energy blasted across the vicinity. It was so intense that the infected within a radius of more than 20,000 feet were instantly incinerated. Everyone from the walls had looks of astonishment as they saw tens of thousands of infected disintegrate from the blast that also destroyed the user. "Oh, he used his last energy to turn himself into a super explosive?" Gustav muttered while holding his chin. "Yes, his sacrifice was a great help," Gradier Xanatus responded. "How?" Gustav asked this because he felt this was not nearly enough to take care of the situation when there were still millions of infected. "Some minutes after his sacrifice, some of the embio scientists reached us on the wall," Gradier Xanatus explained. "Oh," Gustav exclaimed. "They had successfully created a cure for the ashy infection from the sample you passed to them," Gradier Xanatus added. Gustav had an astonished look as he heard that. "I really thought it would take them longer than that to create a cure," he voiced out. If Officer Fola hadn't made the sacrifice, the infected from the east wall area would have managed to infiltrate before the cure arrived, Gradier Xanatus stated. Gustav now understood why the sacrifice was the saving grace. The city would be gone now if Fola didn't perform that action. To put one's life on the line for people you don't know is already a great sacrifice. Talk more of actually giving your life to protect them. Gustav didn't know how to feel about it, but he knew it was a virtuous act. "I don't think I can do that." He knew this within himself. "No, you can't. You're selfish, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing since staying alive sometimes requires selfishness. You're not good to anyone dead," the system voiced in his head. "But is this what Boss Danzo wants me to be? A savior of mankind, someone that is willing to give his life to protect others is definitely the kind of person Boss Danzo would be proud to call his son." Gustav thought. No, that's far from what he wants. Boss Danzo has a sentimentality for lives in general, but you're misinterpreting him. He wants you to do your own thing, stay alive and chase your dreams, but not neglect the plea of others if you have the power to help their situation. You've been doing great so far, the system said with a tone of reassurance. Okay. Gustav heaved a sigh of relief as he said, Hey, this is actually the first time you've acted so nice to me, Gustav said internally with a suspicious tone. Shut up, dimwit. I'm just placing your virgin ass in the right state of mind so you don't ruin things for us, the system stated. And there she goes, ruining the moment, Gustav said internally. Hey, I'm no longer a virgin, Gustav added. You've only done with like once or twice but still a virgin. Shut up, Gustav stated before phasing back to reality. So Luchin City is okay now? Gustav asked. Yes, besides a few renovation and cleansing, the city was saved thanks to the cure, Gradier Xanatus responded. He explained that the cure was transformed into an airborne state by one of the MBO officers, which caused it to spread far and wide. The infected began dropping like flies since they were initially corpse. Those officers who had already been turned died completely after getting disinfected. That was how millions of infected were returned to corpses and the city was saved. Besides the casualties from the MBO side, there was not a single casualty from the city residents. And this is the best possible outcome. I thought it would end way worser than this. Gustav could not help but voice his satisfaction. How did you manage to create a cure sample? Gradier Xanatus questioned. That's a story for another time. What happened to the culprits that were apprehended? Gustav curved Gradier Xanatus' question and asked his. They have been interrogated and we got some information from them. Gradier Xanatus' tone sounded quite bothered as he got to this point. Gustav already knew there was something deeper with this whole situation, so he waited for Gradier Xanatus to spill. Watch this, Gradier Xanatus voiced out as he requested for the AI to play a footage. True ruin. A holographic screen appeared in Gustav's front, and what appeared was the recording of a person. This person was obviously female due to the tone, as well as the long ash-colored silky hair that was spotted behind the helmet-like mask she had on. We are Jinxidus. She began speaking. Chapter 10-12, Becoming a Parallel Beings. We are Jinxidus. She began speaking. Her voice had been auto-tuned, so it was one couldn't identify her real voice. Our aim is to eradicate the mixed bloods and generally any supernatural being that exists on this planet. In the past, the world was less chaotic with just the humans and Slarkovs living on the Earth, but ever since the menace called mixed bloods came into existence, things change. We shall once again bring the world back to the ages of no supernatural abilities and nurture a world where only technology shall reign supreme. She paused for a bit before continuing. We failed in dominating Luchin City, which was amongst our plans to push forth our objective, but I assure you this is just the beginning. We won't stop until we've rid the world of mixed bloods. We are not terrorists. We are a liberation army. We are Jinxidus. Follow current novels on Freeweb. OVL. Com3is. The footage ended at this point. This played all across the world the day after the battle with the infected ended. Gradier Xanatus voiced out. We were unable to trace its origin and pinpoint the location or uncover the identity of this person who was suspected to be the group leader, Gradier Xanatus added. So they were the ones responsible for the incident? Gustav voiced out. Yes, but they had help. This group known as Jinxidus were funded by Young Joe in the past, which is also one of the reasons why the ones we caught had sophisticated weaponry and technological suits, Gradier Xanatus explained. And I'm guessing that's also how they got this variant of ashy infection. Gustav pieced things together at this point. Correct. They also had access to all his secret research bases where they stole a lot of items and became independent before we located those regions. Gradier Xanatus pointed out. Even after death, you're still a pain in the ass. Gustav shook his head as he voiced out. Young Joe's schemes were really deep-rooted to the point that the MBO might still take years before they managed to uncover it all. For someone with such a shrewd mind, it was unknown if one of these plans that would cause another big catastrophe in the future was currently in its hatching phase. The Jinxidus was another issue no one saw coming, and now it would be difficult to get rid of them with their high ability to stay hidden. Young Joe had left another issue, and Gustav was starting to wonder if he was truly dead. Hey, he's truly dead, right? Gustav asked internally. You took his bloodline and killed him. What more proof do you want? The system questioned. Fair point. It's surprising the troubles one man without physical prowess can cause. If Jinxidus has half of his shrewdness and intelligence, then the world really has a lot to be worried about, Gustav said internally. On the bright side, this whole incident has helped you increase your strength, the system pointed out. True, every young Joe-related encounter seems to have that effect. Maybe I should be happy his influence still remains. Gustav could feel his Yarky was now way powerful than before, and he was sure he had gotten a big boost even though he had not checked. The MBO is really taking this serious. They have organized a special task force which sole objective is to hunt down members of the Jinxidus, Gradier Xanatus revealed. As they should. According to you, a small team of 7 almost caused the fall of an entire city and thousands of MBO officers were slaughtered in the process. Yeah, it should be taken very seriously, Gustav stated. It makes sense that they're all Slarkovs. Turns out they're not happy with the current world system and are looking to mold things according to their desires by any means possible. Gradier Xanatus had a contemplative expression as he voiced out. What happened with the culprits? Why were they not able to reveal information on the location of the others? Gustav inquired. Their heads exploded after we took them into custody, Gradier Xanatus responded. Oh, looks like they already planned a way out. This is quite troubling for the MBO. I have other things to worry about, so I won't be bothering myself with this issue. Gustav recalled he had to investigate more on Sir Zill's research now that he had the full information on all of them. You still haven't told me what happened on the battlefield. You didn't pass out because you ran out of energy, did you? Gradier Xanatus had a look of curiosity as he voiced out. No, I did not, Gustav said with a reminiscent look. Hours later, Gustav sat in his room within the MBO tower checking out some things. He had changed out of the hospital wares and was clad in a black tank top with shorts. He had retrieved his possessions, and the MBO were currently not on his case due to Gradier Xanatus. They had placed him into Gradier Xanatus' hand to be watched and kept under control. Host attributes, name, Gustav Crimson level, 82 class. Parallel being EXP, 135,000/45,200,000 HP, 99,000/99,000 energy, 64,000/64,000 attributes, strength, 344 perception, 343 mental fortitude, 339 agility, 339 speed, 371 bravery, 341 intelligence, 343 charm, 119 defense, 342 vitality, 344 endurance, 341 attributes points, 81. Checked his current host attributed data on the system. So I am now a parallel being, Gustav said with a tone of expectation. The system had specifically mentioned times without number how difficult it was to not only achieve cosmic superiority, but also advance to the next stage after sub-parallel. Gustav had managed to get to the next stage in less than 3 years, whereas it took lots of beings centuries to advance. Although Gustav knew well that the main factor for this increase was due to absorbing Gisadinum's cosmic superiority. A parallel cosmic superior being is many times more powerful than a sub-parallel. Your situation with Gisadinum was different because of 2 factors. The system analyzed. Chapter 1013 The War 1. Gisadinum getting reawakened and controlled by the Ashy infection prevented it from being able to use cosmic superiority in the manner Gisadinum would originally use it. It became mindless after all. 2. Your cosmic superiority is far from being normal and has attributes that let it contend with higher cosmic superior beings, the system listed out. It makes sense since parallel beings can tweak reality to a certain extent, but Gisadinum never did that, Gustav said internally. You do understand that this has never been done since the beginning of time, so be on the alert for Compel 3 ications, the system advised. Complications? Internal complications like what was happening when I was unconscious? Gustav asked. No, not that. I never warned that it was unstable to absorb it, because it isn't. You have that absolutely under control after the 3 days spent unconscious, the system corrected. Then what type of complications? Gustav inquired. The type that comes with you attracting certain situations to yourself due to your fast growth. Like I mentioned at the time, That was the greatest defiance of the cosmos, and it's understandable in your case, but do expect complications in the future, the system added. Wow, you said a lot without saying anything. Gustav felt the urge to grab the system and give her a good spanking if it had a physical body. Get used to it. The system responded with an unapologetic tone. The system would always mention things like this cryptically without giving an outright reveal. Gustav decided to keep this at the back of his mind for now, since he had other things to worry about. Gustav reached into himself with his senses as he closed his eyes. Deep within himself, he could now spot two oddly shaped things. The first one was the Yarki, which still looked like a scarlet-colored flame, while the second was a diamond-shaped, ethereal-looking item. The left part of it that made slight contact with the Yarki had some scarlet color, while the other part was golden color. It looked like the diamond-shaped, ethereal-looking item was still in color transformation state. That must be from Jesodinim. Why does it look like something else is shaping into existence beside it? Gustav could notice but one red up beside the diamond, but it looked like it was nothing. He was intrigued, but he knew he would have to wait. Gustav really wanted to test out how powerful his Yarki was currently and check out more of the abilities he had unlocked with cosmic superiority, but he couldn't do that here. He couldn't risk activating Yarki in the presence of the MBO, since he didn't know how the extent of the new effects. They might see it as him getting out of control again, and he needed to keep things under the wraps. He decided he would test it out later, but very far from this location. It's about time I studied the rest of Scientist Sill's research, Gustav muttered. System display the rest of the research, Gustav voiced out. How about I just send it to your mind instead, the system suggested. Sure, Gustav answered. In the next few moments, information began to flow into his head in large amounts. Gustav was processing the ton of information very quickly that the system didn't have any issue displaying all of it in his mind. After a few minutes, Gustav opened his eyes with a look of understanding. Interesting, he really went far in this research. Gustav muttered as thoughts began to appear in his mind. Time to continue the research in his stead, Gustav voiced as he stood to his feet. Violet-colored glows coated his fingertips as he opened a spatial construct and moved in. Glalian Galaxy, thousands of spacecraft could be seen floating above a planet with a mixture of gray and red. These spacecraft were shooting at each other, a side having an unknown symbol on them, and the other side bearing the MBO emblem. Thai-hi, Thai-ya, Thai-yi, Thai-ya. Powerful shots were fired from every corner, and spacecraft were getting blown up by the minute due to the battle between the two sides. As this battle went on, it became heated by the second. Zryria. A loud sound suddenly reverberated across the vicinity like space was being ripped through. Thai-hi. A man with handsome young looks and black hair appeared in the middle of this battlefield. He was clad in a long dark suit and didn't seem like he needed to breathe in space. His sudden appearance caused a big tension across the battlefield in space as an enormous stream of energy began gathering around him. The space all across this part of space began to tremble, and even the stars far away were being pushed away. Concept of time, he muttered underneath his breath as his eyes glowed a white color. Zing, 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 zing. Silver-colored chains wrapped around a ball of blue light began appeared around all of the spacecraft with a different symbol from the MBOs on their spacecraft. Every MBO opposing spacecraft was covered by this circular blue light, wrapped by silver-colored chains, and in the next instant, muffled screams were heard as every affected spacecraft withered and turned into ash within a split second. Just like that, thousands of spacecraft had been reduced to nothing. Dash, how dare you leave us to take care of other matters in the middle of battle? Dash, what insult! Jack of Earth! Dash, you destroyed more of our troops? Three massive figures in form of dark gases appeared with deep white eyes. Their energy seemed menacing, and the spacecraft with MBO emblems in the vicinity began to speed out of this part of space so as not to get caught up in a brawl between these powerful forces. I'll deal with you three later, and it's Mac right now, not Jack. His eyes squinted as he threw a glare at them. Zian. He sped off again in another direction of space where a battle was ongoing. Get back here. The three yelled as they sped after him, while also using their abilities to try to attack, but it was all to no avail. On the bright side, you did gather a lot of information, though. Now you don't doubt that planet Humbad is still in existence anymore, the system stated. Yeah, but a lot of things are still confusing. If it was never destroyed, why did the Slarkovs come to Earth in the first place? And why did they lie that it was destroyed? Gustav voiced out. These questions were mind-boggling, and if the truth ever got out, it would upset a balance that had been in place for thousands of years. Everyone was used to the tale of the Slarkovs' planet getting destroyed with them having to leave, so they could escape its destruction. It would raise an alarm when people found out that tale had been wrong all their lives, and it had been a deceit that was passed down from generation to generation. Gustav confirmed that truly planet Humbad wasn't destroyed with Sir Zill's research. A place within the fourth part had shown proof. Sir Zill initially funded his planetary dimensional displacement theory himself back when he started. Since he was quite rich, he was able to send some scientists to space to do an energy reading of places where the warp demolator had appeared. Expectedly, the energy reading of these places were the same energy readings with the spot in space where planet Humbad used to be located. It had been thousands of years, and the energy of the warp demolator there had decreased significantly, but it was a match nonetheless. The location of planet Humbad had truly been shifted by the warp demolator to an unknown place, and Gustav had to make sure he found it, or he would never be able to complete one of his 5-year quests. Why couldn't the Slarkovs just mention the true crisis was the warp demolator instead of saying their planet was destroyed? Chapter 10-15 5 Years Quest Progress Bonus Chapter dedicated to Wolf Eats the Moon. Your PayPal donation is much appreciated. Why was there a meteor shower of unknown parts from a planet which brought new energies to Earth, and why did the Slarkovs claim that the meteors were broken parts of their destroyed planet? Gustav could not help but think that there was a hidden motive or agenda somewhere. A 3,000 years agenda. What do they hope to gain, and where would it lead to? No matter how much Gustav thought about this, he just couldn't come up with an answer that he was 100% satisfied with. Either way, I have to attend ISOP and make more research, Gustav added. They're starting a worldwide training next month, the system announced. I'm not attending, Gustav voiced as the holographic screens disappeared. I won't have the time, he added. From what I'm seeing, it's mandatory, the system stated. Meh, I still have to make more research in the meantime. Gustav had made up his mind about not attending the training, but he still wanted to be a part of ISOP. Maybe he'll show up on the last week of training, Gustav added. You do know the training holds for 6 months, which is also ending a few days before ISOP begins, the system pointed out. ISOP is in 6 months? Gustav said with a slightly startled expression. Yeah, I was informed ISOP nearly 6 months ago. Didn't realize how much time had passed, Gustav said with a slightly worried look. Don't worry, you still have around 3 years before time's up to complete the 5 years quest. The system voiced out. Actually worry, you should be very worried. The system added. Shut it, Gustav voiced as he checked the status of one of his 5 years quests. Quests, duration, progress, 39. 80/100%, 2 years, duration, progress, 34, time elapsed, 2 years, just 34% even after absorbing Gisadinum's cosmic superiority. Gustav made a low smacking sound with his lips as he voiced out. On the contrary, you should be commended for reaching this far, this fast, the system stated. If I were to calculate how powerful I will be by the end of this quest based on my current progress, I see myself failing this mission, Gustav voiced in response. Which is why you still have to work harder and use every means at your disposal to make sure you complete the quest, the system said with an edging tone. Yeah, I might have to do something a little extreme one of these days, Gustav muttered as thoughts began appearing in his mind. However, he decided he would only take such measures when he was getting closer to the end of the quest, and his progression speed still isn't up to standard. Anyways, I'm going to be spending my time on Earth making more research about the warp demolator before ISOP arrives, Gustav said as he moved to a side to pick up his jacket. But of course, I can't neglect my training, so I have to make sure everything is balanced, he added as he walked out of his room. The MBO camp on a highly exalted platform, thousands of feet above the ground. A battle was playing out. Boom, bang, bam. Sounds of heavy collisions and explosions rang out as the cadets here battled intensely with one another. One of them, who was floating in midair with a big eye exposed on her forehead, shot out a destructive purplish beam. Boom. The beam slammed into a part of this massive platform, hitting one of the cadets here and sending him flying off the platform. "Falco, you're out," someone yelled from the side. This person happened to be an instructor who dived down and caught Falco in his arms. "Shut up, dimwit. I refuse to be defeated by lower life forms," Dark Falco voiced out without regard for the instructor. "Don't make me drop you from this height," the instructor voiced as he flew down. He dropped Falco along with others that had been blasted off the platform. "I demand a rematch, wench," Dark Falco yelled out with an unyielding expression, but the instructor had already flown back up. On the platform, only 4 more cadets were left. Elevra, Angie, EE, and Eldris. "You go right, and he'll go left," Eldris and EE voiced out simultaneously as they switched positions. Now, EE was standing opposite Angie while Eldris was staring at Elevra, who was floating in the air up ahead. "Now, don't take this personally, Angie," E voiced out as vortexes began to appear all over the place. "I want," Angie responded with a smirk as she dashed forward. "Fwyi." She had instantly arrived in front of E, who was still conjuring vortexes, but she suddenly felt a pull from every direction. Angie felt like she was sinking into mud as her figure almost paused while she moved at a snail's pace. "You're fast, but that doesn't mean I can't trap you," E said as he slapped his palms together. The vortexes suddenly turned into reddish color in the next instant as powerful energy spread forth from his figure. On the other side, Eldris kept dashing from side to side across the place as Elevra sent powerful and destructive purplish blasts from the eye on her forehead. The large surface floating in the sky had to do a continuous self-repair because just one of these 4 was powerful enough to destroy it entirely with their strength. Eldris' eyes opened as he closed in on Elevra, causing the color of the vicinity to dissolve into black and white. Elevra suddenly found herself getting more sluggish as this affected her as well. Eldris leapt up at this point and threw a punch forward. "You've gotten stronger, but..." "Grab." Elevra suddenly grabbed hold of Eldris' fist midway, stopping it with ease. "You're still not strong enough," she voiced out before turning him around and slamming him into the ground. Boom. Destructive waves spread forth as the vicinity regained color once more. Chapter 1016, Leaving Camps. Boom. Destructive waves spread forth as the vicinity regained color once more. Adris found himself trapped in place with Elevra's hand around his neck. He made a low groan and shut his eyes from the pain, which was what led to the environment returning to normal. "That's not nearly enough to get rid of me," Eldris voiced as he grabbed hold of her hand and opened his eyes. However, the moment he opened his eyes, Elevra covered his entire face with her other hand, restricting his eyes' abilities. Eldris grabbed onto her other hand and tried to rip it off his face, but it was obvious Elevra's physical strength outmatched his. After Eldris failed to remove her hand, Elevra kept choking him in a bid to make him pass out. Eldris proceeded to let go of her hands and slammed his hand onto the surface of this platform. Bang! A loud sound of collision rang out as both of them shot into air, causing Elevra to slightly loosen her grip. Adris raised his knee upwards with speed, slamming into Elevra's gut, which finally caused both of them to separate. The eyeball on Elevra's head glowed immensely as she shot out a destructive beam at Eldris the instant he managed to separate from her. Serene. As the vicinity turned into black and white once more, Eldris' surrounding twisted and he disappeared. Boom. The beam slammed into the platform and Eldris appeared right behind Elevra while sending a fist towards her back. Bang. She got blasted towards the surface of the platform upon collision and slid for several feet due to the immense force. Elevra quickly picked herself up and dashed to the side. Swoosh! Eldris had appeared right beside her with an outstretched leg, which she managed to dodge after moving to the side. However, Eldris suddenly spread his legs, sending forth another kick from his other leg the instant after she dodged. Bang! This kick slammed heavily into Elevra's side as she was sent flying towards the side once more. Elevra was usually faster, but with the black and white surroundings slowing her down, Eldris could match her speed and even go faster under certain conditions. Boom! She shot out another beam from her forehead, which was threatening to return the vicinity to its original color as it phased forward. Adri stretched forth his hand at this point, causing the beam to be stripped off its color as his figure turned even brighter. Swoosh! He swerved to the side and dodged the beam before dashing forward. Bang! 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 They exchanged clashes a few times, and Elevra could tell that with every exchange Eldris was getting stronger. All of a sudden, bam! A figure slammed into Eldris from the side, causing him to get blasted backwards. Ugh! Ugh! EE and Eldris groaned in pain as they slammed onto the surface of this platform and slid across the floors. "Gadam Angie, you almost broke my back," he yelled out as he stood to his feet. However, just as he did this, Angie arrived before him and sent out a very fast punch. EE's mouth was still wide open as he had just finished his sentence, but he was unable to follow her speed. Bang! The punch slammed into EE's gut, sending him flying across the platform edge. Angie had broken out of the hold from the vortexes initially from activating a small kinetic discharge that blasted EE across the platform. This was what caused him to collide with Eldris earlier. EEOU. Just as the instructor was about to announce EE's loss, Zian. A vortex opened up behind Angie, and he appeared from it. Angie quickly spun around the moment she sensed his presence and was about to attack again when EE got pulled back into the vortex. Another vortex opened up behind her. Zian. Angie moved quickly in a bid to attack once more, but EE didn't appear from it. Instead, he appeared from another vortex on her right. He would disappear into a vortex before Angie could arrive there, and a dummy vortex would open all across the place to fool her. Zian. I'm here. Zian. No here, Zion. Over here, Angie. Zian. On the other side, Elevra had once more regained the upper hand and was slamming Eldris across the place to get him to pass out. Angie knew her battle with EE would not end if she didn't manage to get him to lose consciousness as well. EE could keep using his vortexes to return to the platform even if she threw him off it multiple times. It was the similar for Elevra. Eldris got stronger the more he drew power from things with color in his vicinity. He had also absorbed the color from her eye attack earlier, which led him to getting stronger. About 30 minutes later, only Elevra was left standing on the platform. Elevra wins, the instructor yelled out. All other participants had been blasted off this platform, and she was the last one standing. What had just ended was a private training session between the 10. Elevra, Eldris, EE, Angie, Falco, Ria, Glade, Vera, Matilda, and Timmy. They had been having personal training the past month in preparation for leaving the camp. During this time, they had trained vigorously and had lots of team battles and individual battles like this one that had just ended. Everyone had improved, and even Elevra, who was seen as the strongest, still had a difficult time winning. Anyways, the training had come to an end now that they would be leaving camp the next day. They had all been waiting for this moment, and it was finally here. Their last day in camp, which was why they had this individual battles. I almost had you, E. Angie voiced out as they walked away from the premises where they had just had the battle. Ha, better luck next time. E chucked as he patted her shoulder. Are you excited that you're finally going to be seeing him again tomorrow? Chapter 10:17 The irregularity at the edge of the Milky Way. Earlier, EE had managed to get Angie off the platform by activating one of his vortex's new skills, while Elevra managed to rid the platform of Eldris. Unfortunately, EE was not a match for Elevra, who was not even affected by the suction force of his powerful vortexes. Besides that, he had expended a lot of energy, while Elevra still had lots revered. Elevra was still the undisputed most powerful cadet in their set after Gustav. As everyone grew in strength, she wasn't stagnated either. She was most likely the only person who was close to Gustav's strength amongst their age group, while Eldris was right behind her. One of the boons of this whole thing was the fact that they had improved strength as a group, so if they ever fought together on a battlefield, they would be exceptionally coordinated. Gustav had wished they would be done with camp earlier because of this. He knew a lot of situations would have been easier to take care of if the gang were together with his. Are you excited that you're finally going to be seeing him again tomorrow? EE questioned as the group walked together. HNMM. Angie nodded her head with an excited look. But what if we get sent to a different base entirely? Falco questioned. I'm sure Gustav is aware that we'll be out tomorrow, Timmy stated. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll see him. Who knows, he might be busy with something and not have the chance to meet us before we get deployed for missions, Eldris said with a logical tone. Angie looked a little downcast as she heard this. She knew there was every possibility that happening. Don't forget, our main goal will always be the MBO and saving others. Seeing Gustav can always wait, Elevra said with a strong tone. My boy must have gotten way stronger, though. I can't wait to see him, E said with a light chuckle. The night went by very quickly, and the next morning arrived when some of the cadets were finally leaving. The 10 weren't the only ones who had ended their training and were leaving camp today. There were no less than 100 cadets who were now full-fledged officers, also leaving camp. Some were already final years, so it was long overdue, while the ones from Gustav's set leaving today were around 20 in number. All of them were special class candidates and now full-fledged officers. E was so excited he kept taking pictures as they left camp. Yo, Mom, your son is now a true MBO officer, haha. He laughed with a joyous look as his device flew along with them while recording. That's Angie. Angie waved as the Kamara appeared in front of her. This is Eldris. Elevra. Timmy. Ria. He kept moving from side to side so everyone could be recorded. They all waved with smiles and greeted ES mother whenever the camera floated to their front. Falco. New novel chapters are published on LibRead. CM, nice to meet you, ma'am. Falco greeted with an innocent and respectful expression. TCH, another lower life. Dark Falco suddenly voiced out, causing Falco to quickly cover his mouth up. Sorry. Falco apologized as he moved to the side. No worries, Falco. F***CK, you Dark Falco. E voiced out before turning to face the camera again. Sorry, Mama. He adopted an innocent look as he voiced out. At this point, they were on the massive floating platform where they would be taking a flight on one of the MBO spacecraft to an MBO base. A group of MBO officers suddenly approached EE and the others. With the way they were dressed, it was obvious that they weren't pilots, especially when one of them had an orange-colored uniform like the MBO camp commander. Anything we can help you with, officers? EE questioned as they blocked the path. The highest-ranking officer among this group of officers walked forward at this point and stood directly in front of EE. You, and you. He voiced out while pointing at 5 of them. You're coming with me, he added. Huh? E exclaimed with a look of confusion. Yeah, I know they're arriving today. They'll have to head down to the second base if I want to see them, Gustav voiced out in his seating position within what looked like a boardroom and an office at the same time. I could send someone to get them, Gradier Zanatus suggested. Now there's no need for that. Besides, they also have to get 1 or 2 missions done before I can add them to my platoon, Gustav voiced. Is this going to be an issue? Gustav proceeded to ask. Getting them to join your platoon? Gradier Zanatus voiced out. Not that, this, Gustav voiced while pointing at the holographic screen displayed up ahead. Well, for now it's just an assessment and it is still being observed, so it is too early to tell if it's going to be a threat or not, Gradier Zanatus said while also staring at the screen. On the screen, a part in space was displayed. What could be seen here were whitish lines that made it look like there were small cracks in this part of space. Apparently it was very little, but it had only recently been forming at the edge of the Milky Way. I only showed you this now because I am aware of how strange things are with you and the manifestation of your abilities. So if you know something or sense something, don't hesitate to inform me, Gradier Zanatus explained. For now it truly doesn't seem like a big deal, but no worries, I'll be sure to let you know if I find out something, Gustav voiced out with a suspicious tone. By the way, has scientists been sent there to investigate? Gustav asked. Yes, but they haven't discovered anything. It's not a rift because it doesn't have the same characteristics with a rift, but it does emit a weird and unknown energy, Gradier Zanatus replied. Chapter 1018, Where are the others? You know what that is? Gustav asked internally. It could be a number of things. It's too far away for me to come up with anything accurate. Trying to study it from here will just be me coming up with assumptions, the system responded. I don't know if this is something we should be worried about. Anything related to space is now a sensitive topic because of the warp demolator, but we can't tell if this is relayed or not. Gustav had a contemplative look as he said internally, Gradier Zenatus, do keep me posted on this. I may or may not have an answer later, Gustav stated. All right, Gradier Zenatus stated. Gustav left after a few more seconds of chatting with Gradier Zenatus. He was now heading towards the second base. This would have taken time if he used one of the aircraft or MBO private jets, but with the dimensional bracelet, it only took a couple of seconds. Zing. Gustav disappeared from the MBO tower after choosing his location and reappeared back within the second base. The instant he arrived in the luxurious house within second base, he moved out towards one of the revetment. Gustav could already spot aircraft landing from in the southwest area. Hover has been activated. Swoosh. The base was always filled with MBO officers, so he decided to fly. Gustav arrived there in a few seconds, and upon landing, he could already spot cadets. Gustav was only wearing a tank top and shorts, so no officer around here would even be able to tell what his rank was unless they recognized him. Dash, where is that powerful presence coming from? Dash, isn't that Gustav Crimson? Dash, hey, it's really Gustav Crimson. Dash, I could barely recognize him. He looks different, better. Dash, stronger. I wish we could have seen a fight between him and Rufus. The cadets who were now full-fledged officers conversed about Gustav the moment they spotted him. Dash, what is he doing here? The other officers who had been in the second base since questioned amongst themselves. Everyone knew Gustav was in the MBO tower in Plankton City, so they couldn't understand how he suddenly appeared here. Gustav. A familiar voice was heard from up ahead, causing a smile to appear on his face. A group of 5 could be seen approaching Gustav from up ahead. The hundreds of other cadets walking away from where aircraft were parked up ahead parted ways for this group because everyone knew well the only people Gustav moved with in camp. Falco, Gustav voiced out as he closed in on them. Crazy bastard, you got stronger again? Dark Falco voiced out the instant he arrived in front of Gustav. Shut up, Falco voiced before reaching out to give Gustav a fist bump. Bump. Gustav returned the fist bump and proceeded to do the same with Timmy as well. Rival. Rhea yelled out as he jumped into Gustav's embrace instead of giving a fist bump. Yo, Rhea, Gustav chuckled. Matilda, who was about to hug Gustav earlier, reached out and dragged Rhea by the hair. Tssshhh. Ta-ta-ta. Rhea screamed out in pain as he got pulled away from Gustav. Don't be girly, she voiced out. What I and my rival share is beyond gender limitations, woman. Rhea yelled out as he tried to get her to let go of his hair. Vera, who was at the side, smiled and moved to stand in front of Gustav. Vera, Gustav said with a smile before she leapt into his embrace. Gustav rubbed her hair a little and patted her like a pet. I missed you, she said with a cute tone as she disengaged from him. How have you been doing? Did you practice a lot like I told you to? Gustav questioned. She nodded cutely with a smile. I'm now at the 3rd step Falcon rank and I can control my ability better now, she disclosed. Gustav had a gratified look as he heard that, but then a bothered expression appeared on his face. Where are the others? He inquired. So far he could only see Timmy, Rhea, Falco, Matilda, and Vera. Falco stared at Matilda first before he turned to stare at Gustav. This is what happened. Minutes later, Gustav had a contemplative expression after hearing what Falco had revealed. So they were scouted at the last minute for this unknown mission? Gustav inquired. Yes, Falco confirmed. The officers said they only wanted the 5 of them and the rest of us should follow the cadets to the base, Matilda explained. So you guys have no idea what mission they're embarking on? Gustav questioned. No idea at all. They were taken away in a different aircraft, Timmy said while shaking his head. Gustav had a slightly worried expression, but he knew well that the MBO wouldn't just send them on a mission recklessly knowing they had a lot of potential. They would only send them on a mission they were sure the 5 could handle. Angie, speed. Matilda, destructiveness. Infiltration and escape. Eldris, power. Angie, strength and combat ability. Gustav made analysis in his head. They are definitely sending them on a covert mission. Either they're meant to destroy, protect, or acquire something secretly, Gustav voiced out. How do you know? Falco questioned. Their lineup makes it obvious. Gustav responded. Falco and the others had looks of confusion on their faces as they heard that. Never mind, let's head to the house first, Gustav proposed. They proceeded to leave here and head towards the place Gustav usually stayed with Miss Amy whenever he was here. The instant they arrived at the house, everyone piped down and settled in even. They weren't too worried about the situation with E and the rest because they knew well that getting picked for special missions was normal, especially when certain officers suited some types of missions. Rival, you have to tell us all about your escapades in these past months, Ria voiced out. The entire camp was always talking about you. You have a lot to tell us, Matilda stated as well. Chapter 1019 Mission in Planet Mindalogas, I will in due time. I don't want to have to repeat anything I say later when the others get back, Gustav said while helping them settle in. Right now you guys should focus on getting a mission before ISOP training begins next month, Gustav added with a contemplative tone. Oh come on, just a snippet. Falco was also interested in hearing all about it. We'll be back, guys, Gustav stated as he began tapping on his left wrist. Huh, Falco exclaimed. Need to head back to the MBO tower in Plankton City. I won't be long, Gustav explained. Dimensional travel in 3, 2, 1, zing. A flash of bright blue light engulfed Gustav, and he disappeared in the next instant. Gustav reappeared within the same boardroom he chatted with Gradier Zanatus earlier. The instant Gradier Zanatus saw him, he knew something was up. Gustav explained what had happened with the other 5 to him, and Gradier Zanatus decided to help him check the mission they got drafted for. It's an outside planet mission. After some minutes of asking around, Gradier Zanatus finally had some information for him. They're off planet right now? Gustav was a bit surprised by this. Yes. It was impromptu, but they are currently off planet, headed towards another planet, Gradier Zanatus stated. Where? Gustav inquired. Planet Mindalogas, Gradier Zanatus revealed. Planet Mindalogas? Why? In an unknown part of the galaxy, a massive spacecraft with the MBO emblem traveled at very high speed. Ziyuel had passed through several wormholes as it sped its way across the Milky Way. Within a group of 7, could be seen seated across one another in spacesuits. Besides this group of 7, 2 high-ranking MBO officers who were also clad in spacesuit strapped themselves in different spots. It was already obvious that they weren't a part of the mission like the 7. I certainly did not expect this, Ildris voiced out from the side. That we would be on a mission to a planet several galaxies away? EE questioned with a light chuckle. Yeah, Ildris replied. The mission? It's certainly one we can successfully complete, Angie voiced out as well. The generals say we just have to get rid of the device or steal it, Elevra said with a tone of decisiveness. Glade was also in their midst, and they all began planning according to the information that had been revealed to them. They were all clad in dark space suits which covered the entirety of their bodies, so it was hard to tell them apart, but their voices made things easier. Just follow our instructions, newbies. One of the other 2 were given the role captain and co-captain of the squad voiced out. Sure. So long as you know what you guys know what you're doing. Elevra was not one that took to getting controlled unless the situation demanded it, so she voiced out with a strong tone that depicted she would disobey commands that didn't make sense to her. Are you assuming we're stupid and can't lead a squad? The one who spoke earlier voiced out once more. Don't put words in my mouth. Just lead right if you want to be followed. Elevra voiced out once more. The officer was about to speak again when the other one interrupted him. Davidson, it's fine. We'll see what they've got when we land. I hope to God that you 5 are capable enough, or we'll leave you behind. The captain of the squad voiced out. Don't be so quick to assume, Captain Spark. Who knows who will be left in the dust when we land, E said with a smile while turning to stare at Angie. If one thing the 5 had learnt from Gustav despite being different from him was not backing down in the face of intimidation. They knew if they just left things without exchanging a few words with the captain and co-captain, it gave these 2 the chance to push them around anyhow they willed. Are we all getting along? One of the generals voiced out from up front. Yes, sir. They all yelled out in unison. Good. You 7 will have to work fast in unity and complete this mission. Once you're done, meet back at the drop zone and an emergency spacecraft will get you out of there. Remember you have to leave within the duration set or you will die there. The general voiced out with a strong tone. Is that understood? He questioned. Yes, sir. They yelled out in unison once more. After the general went silent, the five went back to making plans. The second MBO base, their mission is off-planet? Falco voiced with a shocked tone. Yes, Gustav confirmed. How lucky. No off-planet mission is below 5 stars, Matilda voiced out with an envious tone. Officers with off-planet mission success are more revered and even have chances of being amongst the group of officers that get sent on galactic missions, Timmy voiced with a tone of interest. Not even Gustav has embarked on an off-planet mission before, Vera said with a low tone. There was never an opportunity to many situations happening on Earth that I couldn't ignore, Gustav pointed out. While Gustav was speaking with Gradier Xanatus about the mission earlier, Gradier Xanatus revealed something to him. They already sent a team earlier, but said team was wiped out before they achieved the objective. Only 2 of them are still alive, so it's also a rescue mission because the MBO never abandons one of their own, Gradier Xanatus voiced out. Oh, that makes things more difficult, doesn't it? Gustav questioned. They're your friends. Do you believe they are good enough to complete the mission? Gradier Xanatus threw out this question as well. I do, Gustav replied. Then it's fine, Gradier Xanatus stated. Oh, and by the way, they initially planned to send you on that mission. You ignored them, Gradier Xanatus revealed. What? Gustav had a look of surprise as he exclaimed. He then recalled General Sauerkraut looking everywhere for him at the time he was creating a cure for the ashy infection. Chapter 1020 I will be participating in IYSOPSEE, then recalled General Sauerkraut looking everywhere for him at the time he was creating a cure for the ashy infection. Oh, Gustav nearly face-bombed as he reminisced. Gustav's mind reeled back to reality at this point. It doesn't really matter anyways. We'll be leaving for ISOP in 6 months' time anyways, Gustav stated. Falco voiced with a curious tone. You've decided to participate? Matilda asked with a slightly surprised look. Yes, I will be participating in ISOP, Gustav disclosed. They all had excited looks as they heard that. But I won't be joining you guys in the training though, Gustav added. The training is mandatory, Falco stated. Not for me. I'll be busy with other things, Gustav said with an unbothered expression. By the way, I got a mission for you 5, Gustav added. Everyone gathered around him as they heard this. I will be able to add you guys to my platoon if you're able to successfully complete this mission, so don't mess it up, Gustav pointed out with a serious tone. Sure, just tell us what the mission is, Timmy voiced in response. My body is itching to finally be on the battlefield, haha, Ria said with an excited look. The day went by very quickly and Gustav had spent this time making inquiries, passing information and preparing the other 5 for their mission in 2 days' time. For EE and the others, they were still cruising across the galaxy due to the distance of Mindaloga's planet. The galaxy in which Mindaloga's was located was quite distant, and with the speed of the spacecraft, it would take no less than 4 days of traveling to get there. This was a huge step up compared to back in the past when it would take many months for them to complete such a journey. This speed was made possible with the dimensional checkpoints placed in different parts of space that generated teleportation wormholes. They could beat time and travel way faster with these wormholes, letting them appear millions of light years ahead of their position. This shortened the travel, which made it possible for them to get there in 4 days. Even with these dimensional checkpoints constructed in different parts of space that made space travel faster, there were still journeys that would take weeks or months if they were way farther than Mindaloga's planet. The group was lucky this travel would only be taking 4 days. This would mostly be a crazy experience for them. While on this journey, they noticed that they would occasionally stop at different locations. These locations in space had massive spacecraft that looked like mansions floating in space. They would be scanned by the officers from these massive spacecraft before they were given permission to resume flight. According to the generals in the spacecraft, this was usual protocol and was always needed to separate criminals from legal spacecraft. Space pirates were common in this age, and since space was endless, catching these criminals was always difficult. However, these space pirates knew not to ever try to cross paths with the MBO or any other power intergalactic force in space, so 99% of the times it was safe for MBO spacecraft. They rarely ever got attacked by any criminals in space. As the days went by, Gustav still stuck to his schedule of making more research about the warp demolator while training also. Alright guys, your mission will most likely take about 2 weeks to complete, and I don't think the others will take too long to complete. There's either so we'll still be meeting back here after y'all are done, Gustav voiced out. Falco, Matilda, Timmy, Vera, and Ria all nodded as they heard that. Phew, our first 5-star mission, Matilda voiced with a nervous tone. Don't worry, you'll do good, Gustav said while tapping her shoulder. They'll be one step closer to being powerful enough to go after Daria if I complete this, she assured herself internally. Gustav saw them off to an aircraft that was waiting to cart them away to their mission location. After a few minutes they were gone. Just met up after months and they're gone again. Gustav shook his head. Being a part of the MBO was truly no easy task. Gustav now understood why more than 80% of the MBO was without spouses. Even those who had spouses probably didn't have the chance to spend a lot of time with them. Missions were unending, and there would always be one issue or the other. Jack and Mac were still unmarried even after living for over a century. Gustav was not even sure if they had ever dated anyone or had any romance with the opposite sex. He was sure he would have been the same way if Angie was not in the picture. MBO officers were truly lonely people in the aspect of romance, but at the very least Gustav was trying to bring all the people he cared about together. If he managed to get every one of them to be a part of his platoon, it would make things less lonely since they would always be with him on any mission. Gustav proceeded to head back to the MBO tower after the 5 had left. He won't be seeing any one of them again till 2 weeks' time, and he was still a little disappointed he didn't even get to see Angie or but he shrugged it off. It's just 2 weeks, nothing compared to months, Gustav said internally. You really miss them, don't you? The system questioned with a teasing tone. No, I don't, Gustav responded as he walked down the corridors of the MBO tower. Poor Gustav. He misses his lover, misses the kisses, misses the bedroom actions. The system kept teasing. Shut up. I don't me. Gustav. In the process of this bantering, a familiar voice called out to Gustav. Gradier Xanatus, Gustav voiced out as he spotted the figure that had just called out to him. Come see this, Gradier Xanatus said while leading him to an office within the tower. Chapter 1021, Checking up on Miss Amy. Upon entering, a large holographic screen could be seen on display. This holographic screen showed a part in space. It was the same area at the edge of the Milky Way where white lines resembling cracks were spotted. It has spread, Gradier Xanatus voiced out while hinting at the holographic footage. I can see that, Gustav responded while moving closer to the screen. It could be seen on the screen that these white lines were not only longer, but had now appeared in multiple spots as well. Gustav's eyes squinted as he questioned, have the researchers figured anything out yet? Nothing at all, even after all the readings. They still believe this isn't a rift, Gradier Xanatus responded. Can I get the data of the energy readings? Gustav questioned as he kept staring at the footage with a suspicious expression. It will take a while, but I can get it to you, Gradier Xanatus replied. How long? Gustav inquired. A few days, okay. Gustav went back to his room after a few more minutes of discussing with Gradier Xanatus. Just like he had mentioned before, it would be dumb for him to just make assumptions without properly looking at different clues to investigate the situation. Gustav couldn't put his thumb on why he felt a sense of familiarity from this recent happening, but even with that he still had no idea what could be causing this. His gut was never wrong, so he was sure that whatever discovery that was made in the future would be related to something he somehow knew. Gradier Xanatus had mentioned that whatever it was, the MBO had placed him and a few others in charge to make sure it was taken care of before it became an issue in the future. The MBO was all for prevention before cure. They didn't want to wait till it became an actual problem before tackling it, which was why they were already taking some steps to neutralize the cracks. Gradier Xanatus just had to inform Gustav because he wanted to remain posted about this situation, and it would help if Gustav knew anything about this. Now Gustav just had to wait till the data of the energy readings was gathered for him. After arriving back at his room, Gustav proceeded to sit on his bed cross-legged and began to channel his bloodline. Almost at the 3rd step. I should be able to achieve it in the next 2 to 3 days, Gustav said internally as channeled his bloodline. close to reaching the third step of Echo rank at this point. Gustav still had one more bloodline rank boost pill. If he used this, advancing to the next step would have been instantaneous. It had been months already, but Gustav wanted to advance to the next step naturally, even though it was slower. He decided he would only use another pill in case of an emergency. I also have to check on Miss Amy today. Gustav decided he would check on Miss Amy by nightfall. It had been a week since he last checked up on her to be sure she was okay. Night arrived very quickly and Gustav stopped channeling his bloodline at this point. Upon opening his eyes, he activated God Eyes. Life sign tracking has been activated. He proceeded to use this ability and instantly picked Miss Amy's life sign in his mind. Zuunin. His mind drifted into another dimension as his sight displayed a different place. Gustav could sight some flaky-looking dust in the vicinity and a dark ground. "Oh, the fog is lifting," Gustav said internally as he noticed this. The other times he had been checking on Miss Amy, the fog in the area always made visibility so bad he had no idea where Miss Amy could be because of this. Unlike the last time as well, there was also a little bit of brightness in the sky. He could see through Miss Amy's forehead, so view was limited unless she moved about. Gustav could only see in a particular direction and couldn't even see the sky properly due to this. Miss Amy suddenly tilted her head a little to the side, turning Gustav's vision slanted. This made Gustav see into the sky better, and his eyes squinted a bit as he spotted some strange things. There are no stars, moons, or even a sun. So where is this dim lighting coming from? He wondered. Gustav couldn't find a way to answer this question since he couldn't look around more than he wanted to. He could tell that Miss Amy was currently seated somewhere on this dark ground, just staring forward. He was unable to answer the questions plaguing his mind as Miss Amy lowered her head and stared down at something she just pulled out of thin air. Gustav's eyes widened as an holographic image popped up in Miss Amy's line of sight. It was an image of both of them. Gustav had his mouth wide open like he was yelling in pain, while Miss Amy was seating on his back with a domineering loom. Gustav recalled this was taken during a training session where Miss Amy had totally dominated him. He gave up and was tapping out, but Miss Amy refused to free him and kept seating on his back. A smile appeared on Miss Amy's face as she reached out to touch Gustav's face, but her hand phased through the holographic screen. Zian, it disappeared after a few more seconds, and Miss Amy went back to staring into thin air. Gustav wished he had a way to pass a message to her. He wanted to tell her of all his endeavors and how he had gotten rid of the bastard that put her in this situation. Sigh, Miss Amy. Just as Gustav said this internally, Miss Amy turned her head left and right repeatedly. Did I just? I must be getting delusional now, she muttered while face-palming. She felt she heard a very low voice, but not audible enough to make out the words, so she was sure she just hallucinated for a bit. Chapter 1022 were closes. She felt she heard a very low voice, but not audible enough to make out the words, so she was sure she just hallucinated for a bit. If Gustav could hear what she was saying, he would understand that his thoughts just traveled across galaxies into Miss Amy's mind, even though it was barely audible. He would have tried better to make it work, but Atlas, he had no idea Miss Amy heard a little bit of what he said. Must be because I expended too much energy today. But in breaking through, so it wasn't a useless endeavor. She voiced out what she thought was the reason for her hallucination while looking around. Gustav could sense her loneliness despite Miss Amy being the kind of person that stayed away from people. At this point, Gustav had to deactivate life signs tracking due to expending a lot of energy. The farther the location of the person's life signs that he was currently tracking, the more energy would be expended. With how much energy was being expended currently, he was sure Miss Amy was very far away. He still wished he could find a way to tell her to come back to Earth since there was already a cure. However, there was still no clue as to where exactly she was in the vast and endless space. It was even more confusing with what Gustav had seen this night. Another thing that baffled Gustav was the fact that she had been gone for months, yet she doesn't seem to have spiraled out of control like the other infected. Her mind was still sane, and she didn't feel the need to go on any rampage. Gustav had even spotted her hands and part of her wrists multiple times when he checked on her, and from what he noticed, her skin wasn't ashy. She still seemed a bit pale, and it was hard to give a 100% accurate analysis of her skin looks due to the dim lighting in her vicinity, but Gustav could still tell that her skin was not as ashy as the other infect. Doesn't she have any plans of fixing things ABD coming back? Gustav was quite worried that he might never be able to set eyes on Miss Amy in the flesh. There was no way to know how exactly she was faring, but all he knew was the fact that she was currently all right. If Gustav had left life signs tracking active for a few more seconds, he would have noticed something that would have helped since Miss Amy looked around after he deactivated the ability. They're never gonna find her if she doesn't want to be found. I guess I can only hope and keep looking for ways to actually contact her, Gustav thought. He went back to channeling his bloodline afterwards, which he focused on for the entire night. In a flash, 3 more days had gone by, and on this day, Gustav planned to visit a particular research center. Cartonsbull City. It'll be in and out before anyone realizes it, Gustav thought as he stood to his feet to prepare. He got into the bathroom, took his shower, and was out in a couple of minutes. Gustav wore a suit and a tie along with plain black pants that made him look a bit nerdy. To add the ultimate touch of nerdiness, he got a glass with clinical lens from his storage device and put on. Gustav moved to stand right in front of the mirror as his facial features and body size changed. Gustav reached a height of 7 feet as his body turned thinner and his skin a little paler. His hair became yellow in color as he adopted a very different but handsome young nerdy look. Gustav smiled with a tone of gratification after scrutinizing his current looks. "Time to go," he said internally as he activated his dimensional bracelet. Gustav was currently heading to the secret research center where Amira's mother from the Bureau was making research on scientist Ill's dimensional displacement theory. Despite knowing the location since over a month ago, Gustav didn't head there all this time. He didn't have much hope for this visitation, but he wanted to make sure he checked a couple of things out related to scientist Ill's research completely before embarking on this journey. He was sure this wouldn't take long anyways, since he would be visiting with the identity of a scientist from the Bureau. It was a fake identity, but Gustav had planted it in the database, so even if this person did not truly exist, he would have no problem using the identity. Meanwhile, on a planet with red sands and a grayish-looking sky filled with green stars, a group of 7 silently made their way across a silent pathway. This pathway seemed to be situated between what seemed like 2 massive pipe-like structures. It was impossible to tell that the 2 structures by the side were like pipelines if one was walking on this path due to their massive sizes. However, if one was staring from above, far high in the sky, one would be able to tell that these looked like massive steel pipes. The GPS says we'll have to turn right after crossing another 100 feet. One of the members of this group, who was also clad in dark skin-tight suit, voiced out. They were all clad in this suit and had a dark helmet with red glasses on as well. This helped them in breathing within this foreign planet. "Davidson, how far away are we from the designated point right now?" The person who seemed to be the leader of the group inquired. 12,000 paces away, Davidson responded while staring at the holographic image the device in his hand was shooting out. "We're close. At this pace, it should only take us about an hour to get there," Eldris voiced out. "We've been traveling for almost 12 hours. At least we're close now," Glade said with a tone of relief and excitement. "Guys, but how is it that we've not encountered any form of disturbance since we dropped onto this planet?" E stated with a disturbed tone. Chapter 10:23-2. Do you know what that is? Gustav asked internally. It could be a number of things. It's too far away for me to come up with anything accurate. Trying to study it from here will just be me coming up with assumptions, the system responded. I don't know if this is something we should be worried about. Anything related to space is now a sensitive topic because of the warp demolator, but we can't tell if this is relayed or not. Gustav had a contemplative look as he said internally. "Gradier Zenatus, do keep me posted on this. I may or may not have an answer later," Gustav stated. "All right," Gradier Zenatus stated. Gustav left after a few more seconds of chatting with Gradier Zenatus. He was now heading towards the second base. This would have taken time if he used one of the aircraft or MBO private jets, but with the dimensional bracelet, it only took a couple of seconds. Zing. Gustav disappeared from the MBO tower after choosing his location and reappeared back within the second base. The instant he arrived in the luxurious house within second base, He moved out towards one of the revetment. Gustav could already spot aircraft landing from in the southwest area. Hover has been activated. Swoosh. The base was always filled with MBO officers, so he decided to fly. Gustav arrived there in a few seconds, and upon landing, he could already spot cadets. Gustav was only wearing a tank top and shorts, so no officer around here would even be able to tell what his rank was unless they recognized him. Dash, where is that powerful presence coming from? Dash, isn't that Gustav Crimson? Dash, hey, it's really Gustav Crimson. Dash, I could barely recognize him. He looks different, better. Dash, stronger. I wish we could have seen a fight between him and Rufus. The cadets, who were now full-fledged officers, conversed about Gustav the moment they spotted him. Dash, what is he doing here? The other officers who had been in the second base since questioned amongst themselves. Everyone knew Gustav was in the MBO Tower in Plankton City, so they couldn't understand how he suddenly appeared here. Gustav. A familiar voice was heard from up ahead, causing a smile to appear on his face. A group of 5 could be seen approaching Gustav from up ahead. The hundreds of other cadets walking away from where aircraft were parked up ahead parted ways for this group, because everyone knew well the only people Gustav moved with in camp. Falco, Gustav voiced out as he closed in on them. Crazy bastard, you got stronger again? Dark Falco voiced out the instant he arrived in front of Gustav. Shut up, Falco voiced before reaching out to give Gustav a fist bump. Bump. Gustav returned the fist bump and proceeded to do the same with Timmy as well. Rival. Rhea yelled out as he jumped into Gustav's embrace instead of giving a fist bump. Yo, Rhea, Gustav chuckled. Matilda, who was about to hug Gustav earlier, reached out and dragged Rhea by the hair. TSSSHHH. Ta-ta-ta. Rhea screamed out in pain as he got pulled away from Gustav. Don't be girly, she voiced out. What I and my rival share is beyond gender limitations, woman. Rhea yelled out as he tried to get her to let go of his hair. Vera, who was at the side, smiled and moved to stand in front of Gustav. Vera, Gustav said with a smile before she leapt into his embrace. Gustav rubbed her hair a little and patted her like a pet. I missed you, she said with a cute tone as she disengaged from him. How have you been doing? Did you practice a lot like I told you to? Gustav questioned. She nodded cutely with a smile. I'm now at the 3rd step Falcon rank and I can control my ability better now, she disclosed. Gustav had a gratified look as he heard that, but then a bothered expression appeared on his face. Where are the others? He inquired. So far he could only see Timmy, Rhea, Falco, Matilda, and Vera. Falco stared at Matilda first before he turned to stare at Gustav. This is what happened. Minutes later, Gustav had a contemplative expression after hearing what Falco had revealed. So they were scouted at the last minute for this unknown mission? Gustav inquired. Yes, Falco confirmed. The officers said they only wanted the 5 of them, and the rest of us should follow the cadets to the base, Matilda explained. So you guys have no idea what mission they're embarking on? Gustav questioned. No idea at all. They were taken away in a different aircraft, Timmy said while shaking his head. Gustav had a slightly worried expression, but he knew well that the MBO wouldn't just send them on a mission recklessly knowing they had a lot of potential. They would only send them on a mission they were sure the 5 could handle. Angie, speed. Matilda, destructiveness. Infiltration and escape. Ildris, power. Angie, strength and combat ability. Gustav made analysis in his head. They are definitely sending them on a covert mission. Either they're meant to destroy, protect, or acquire something secretly, Gustav voiced out. How do you know? Falco questioned. Their lineup makes it obvious. Gustav responded. Falco and the others had looks of confusion on their faces as they heard that. Never mind, let's head to the house first, Gustav proposed. They proceeded to leave here and head towards the place Gustav usually stayed with Miss Amy whenever he was here. The instant they arrived at the house, everyone piped down and settled in even. They weren't too worried about the situation with E and the rest because they knew well that getting picked for special missions was normal, especially when certain officers suited some types of missions. Rival, you have to tell us all about your escapades in these past months, Rhea voiced out. The entire camp was always talking about you. You have a lot to tell us, Matilda stated as well. Chapter 1024, Creating a Diversion. Jack could have destroyed the entire planet long ago, but he wasn't allowed to, and he wasn't allowed to infiltrate either because they couldn't risk it, so he had to wait till they had gotten rid of this device. Can you get us in now? Captain Spark questioned. Getting us in was never the problem. E rolled his eyes as he figured Captain Spark didn't understand his initial explanation. From what I'm seeing, I can make us appear anywhere within now, but as you can see, the entire place is swarming with them. We will be surrounded the moment we appeared within, E added while staring at the X-ray like holographic footage. Captain Spark had a contemplative expression as he stared at the footage for a bit. We have 2 missions on this planet. Retrieving the device and rescuing the other 2 officers from the group that was initially sent here, he began voicing out. We'll be splitting up because the moment they know we're here, it's going to be harder to find the other 2 when we're done completing the first mission, Captain Spark added. Oh, okay, so what's the plan? Eldris inquired. It's time for us to see how fast you are, Captain Spark voiced while staring at Angie. Angie's eyes squinted as she heard that. A few minutes later, the guards standing in front of the cave entrance at the foot of the rock stared in a particular direction after sensing something. An asterisk at it %, asterisk divided by at caret. The first one spoke in a weird tongue as the other one also stared forward with a look of suspicion. A figure walking towards them from up ahead became even clearer when the person began causing a certain silver glow in the surroundings. She had 3 horns protruding out of her forehead, and her pinkish and silver hair could be seen floating in the air as she took steps closer to the rock. Hashtag ++ equals % and at caret : caret % at caret at. The other guard who voiced out the same weird tongue, which translated to, "It's an alien." It quickly raised an alarm as Angie arrived close to the entrance suddenly. Boom! A burst of silver energy blasted forth from her figure, slamming heaving into the massive rock and the dark cloudy figures floating in front. The 2 were instantly disintegrated by the sheer force of the energy that wasn't even accumulateto 100% GBBBHHHLLGVVBBB. The entire rock trembled vigorously, but surprisingly that was the highest that happened. Despite how strong the energy was, it didn't even manage to cause a single crack on this massive rock. Loud voices in different tongues suddenly began to ring out from every direction as the other Mindalogas began flying out of the cave to confront the intruder. In barely a few seconds, more than 200 of them had appeared and surrounded Angie from every direction. The 3rd horn that had grown out of Angie's forehead earlier rescinded as she regained her former look. Angie's figure suddenly blurred as she turned around and sped away. Swoosh! The Mindalogas who thought she couldn't escape because they had already surrounded her were shocked when she displayed immense speed and wriggled her way out of their formation. The yells in a different tongue was heard once more as they turned around and gave a chase. The over 200 Mindalogas gave chase to Angie as she sped further away from the rock structure. They had no idea she was leading them away, so the others could have easier entry into the rocky structure. Angie would occasionally slow down, so the Mindalogas could close in a bit, only for her to speed up again. The Mindalogas shot out whitish beams from their face area as they chased after her, but Angie was quick enough to dodge these projectiles as she led them around the place. Soon, a vortex opened up within a hallway in the rock structure, and the captain, Alevera, along with E, phased out of it. Davidson, we're in, direct us, he muttered through the communication channel. Dash, take the first left. Be careful, there are guards patrolling that pathway. Davidson informed from a hidden location outside of the rocky structure. While the 3 infiltrated to get the device, Angie led the Mindalogas around with her speed. She felt she could do this all day because despite their flight ability, she was still faster than them. Glade and Eldris had been tasked with finding the other 2 officers who were said to have gone into hiding after the unsuccessful mission. This second objective wasn't as important as the first, which was why they wouldn't be blamed if they were unable to find these 2, but at the very least they had to try. Earth, oh interesting, truly interesting, madam. A slim 7 feet tall young man in glasses voiced out with a hearty smile as he spoke to a middle-aged looking woman with blonde hair. Mr. Ispect, I truly hope the world government do not intend to pull their funding on this research, the blonde-haired middle-aged woman said with a pleading tone. It is to be debated, Mrs. May. So far I have seen that there have been progress with the research, so I will put in a good word for you. Mr. Ispect, who was actually Gustav in disguise, voiced out. Thank you so much, Mr. Ispect. It would truly be a shame if the funding was to end and this research ends up being accurate in its topic. It could potentially save the world if more discoveries are made. Mrs. May responded with a tone of appreciation while explaining. I absolutely understand, Mrs. May, Mr. Ispect said while staring through a glass wall where a lab full of scientists could be seen. An instrument with a circular top and thin pole like glass extending from the bottom could be seen making some weird calculations. Are you sure you did not leave out any information or discovery? Mr. Ispect questioned. None at all. The data I passed to you is everything we have found out in the past few years, Mrs. May said with a tone of certainty. I guess this concludes my visit here today, Mr. Ispect said while smiling. Chapter 1025. Heading to the Edge of the Milky Ways. I apologize for the chapter's issues. I guess this concludes my visit here today, Mr. Ispect said while smiling. They proceeded to both give their farewells before he proceeded to leave. Ispect, who was Gustav, reached outside and got into an hover car that drove him across the city. After getting down, he moved to a secluded location and activated the dimensional bracelet. Zing. Reappearing back within his room in the tower, Gustav smiled as he transformed back into his original look. Today had gone exactly as he wanted, and he had gotten information about how far they had gone in secretly conducting Sir Zill's research. Mrs. May was Amira's mother, and Gustav had successfully fooled every one of them over there that he was from the world government and here to inspect, so of course they had to reveal all their findings to him. Gustav was not stupid himself, so he had already discovered most of the things Amira's mother revealed to him, but there were still a few pieces of information which he considered were quite important. Gustav's fingertips suddenly glowed up as he opened a spatial room. He proceeded to move into the room that had lots of equipments within. It was literally a mini laboratory. Gustav proceeded to check for some tools and began making something. It's good that they created a device to scan for irregularities in space. This would make it easier for me to find traces of the warp demolator and discern its patterns of appearing easier, Gustav thought as he kept up with his work. They had revealed the blueprints used in making that device so Gustav could build it easily with the right tools. Zing, the sacred orb appeared right beside him and turned into a 12 feet tall robot. Keep working on it. I need to get some tools, Gustav commanded. The sacred orb and Gustav were connected similar to how Gustav and the system were connected, so even without giving any explanations, the orb understood what Gustav was driving at. It was quite strange, and Gustav still wondered how the sacred jewel was capable of 90% of the things it could do. It was still such a mystery to Gustav that he refrained from using it most of the times, even though he knew just how powerful the sacred jewel was. Gustav moved out of the spatial room at this point to get some more of the equipments he needed to finish the device. Just as he walked out of his room, he spotted Gradier Xanatus approaching from the left side of the corridor. Gustav, Gradier Xanatus voiced with a tone of urgency. What's wrong? Gustav questioned. Minutes later, they were in the same boardroom they had been meeting up in earlier, and a holographic screen was on display. They have connected to each other? Gustav voiced with a suspicious tone as he stared at the screens. Precisely. The white lines have now connected to each other, and now it's starting to look like a gigantic circular crack in space, Gradier Xanatus responded. What they were staring at was exactly how Gradier Xanatus had described. This area in space was at the edge of the Milky Way, and it was void of stars, but this white cracks covering a large area were glowing intensely. Initially they were separated, and just appearing in different spots, but now these lines had joined. The cracks had spanned across more than 50,000 kilometers radius in space and looked like it was still increasing. And I'm guessing you guys still have no idea what's causing this, Gustav voiced out. Gradier Xanatus shook his head lightly in response. Was there any effect when the researchers got closer to it? Gustav asked. It is impossible to get close to it now. The last person that tried turned to ash, Gradier Xanatus revealed. What? Without getting pulled into any sort of portal or vortex? Gustav said with a surprised tone. None whatsoever. Spacecraft are getting ripped apart because, unlike before, it is now sending forth a detrimental charge of energy. It has become dangerous to move close to, Gradier Xanatus disclosed. That's not a rift. At least a rift would pull a person in before ripping them to shreds or turning them to ash. Gustav had a contemplative expression as he voices out while holding his chin. We can't get close enough to it at this point to get a sample and conduct a test based on the current energy it is emitting, Gradier Xanatus added. Do you want me to go there? Gustav asked. No. I am only informing you about it for two reasons. First, you may know something, so it's also like him asking for advice, and second, you mentioned you wanted to be kept to date, but there is no way I am sending you there. Gradier Xanatus said while shaking his head. Minutes later, Z and some straps bonded around Gustav's body as he sat within what looked like an aircraft chamber but with more intricate designs. The seats on the other sides were unoccupied, and only one person stood in front of him at this time. Are you sure this is okay? Gradier Xanatus voiced with a disturbed tone. I am going to be perfectly fine. You've only been sending scientists out there who are clearly weaker than I am, Gustav voiced as he tapped on his left shoulder area. Zuin's dark helmet phased out and covered up his head. Zion. A red glass shifted from sideways and covered the space in the eyes area of the helmet, completely giving Gustav a spaceman look. I am still skeptical about sending you there. It is not safe, and I don't want the young miss to kill me because that's what will happen if you don't get back in one piece. Gradier Xanatus voiced out once more. Don't worry. Besides, we're already here, so what's the point of changing your mind now? Just flow with it. Don't worry if she kills you. You can come join me in the afterlife. Gustav chuckled lightly as he voiced out. The suit with the helmet had made the tone of his voice sound mechanical, due to it projecting his voice from within, so it could be heard properly. Gradier Xanatus let out another sigh before saying once more, be careful, the moment things feel dangerous. Abort the mission instantly. Gradier Xanatus proceeded to move towards the entry point of the spacecraft while voicing out, they'll be in contact the entire time, and there's a cam in your suit, so we'll be watching you as well. Copy that, Gustav voiced in response. The hatch of the spacecraft closed up and Gustav was the only one left in this place. The pilot and co-pilot were both seated in the cockpit ready to launch the spacecraft into space. This mission was a very impromptu one, and hadn't been revealed to the higher-ups because Gradier Xanatus was considered a higher-up himself and could make this decision before information them on a later date. Since they had put him in charge of this situation, he was licensed to make such decisions that would affect the situation for the better. Gustav had managed to convince Gradier Xanatus to send him on this earlier. As much as Gradier Xanatus didn't want to agree to it, Gustav made pretty valid points about being the only strong officer close to being a scientist himself. He had found the cure for the ashy infection and even achieved some crazy science feats, so he wasn't wrong. It looked like he was the perfect officer for the job, especially when most scientists were not very strong mixed bloods. Gradier Xanatus could only hope now that Gustav would be okay. The aim of this trip to the edge of the Milky Way was to take a sample from the energy these conjoined cracks were emitting. They had not been able to get close enough to get this done since the cracks started connecting to each other. According to the scientists that survived, they said it felt like getting closer to the surface of the sun. Spacecraft nowadays were capable of doing this without burning up, but according to the scientists, this was at least 7 times worse. Gustav really couldn't bring up any theory on how this would be 7 times hotter than the surface of the sun when there wasn't any catalyst. There were just lines, or rather cracks in space that had covered a radius bigger than the circumference of Earth. It certainly was suspicious, but still didn't make sense. Gustav was counting on the fact that he would be able to gather the energy sample without getting too close to it. He was confident in the toughness of his body, but this was 7 times hotter than the sun. He wasn't interested in testing out if his body was durable enough to withstand it. 3 Ryriath, right outside the spacecraft, a burst of flames had been ignited from the bottom of this building-sized machine. Chapter 1026. Guardians consents. Right outside the spacecraft, a burst of flames had been ignited from the bottom of this building-sized machine. The spacecraft lifted off into the air after getting cleared for takeoff as the rooftop of the MBO Tower's last floor opened up. Since they were already in space, there was no need for any part of the spacecraft to dislodge or anything like that. They flew across space, traveling at a speed that was 1,000 times faster than sound at the onset. As the spacecraft traveled further into space, it breached the speed of light, generating a wormhole that increased travel speed. Originally, it would take very long to get to the edge of the Milky Way, but with the speed of this spacecraft, it would only take about a day. Gustav was already admiring space as they blasted through the wormhole before arriving at another part of space. In just a few minutes, they had long passed Jupiter and were heading further into the Milky Way. Even if a spacecraft was moving at the speed of light, it would still take billions of hours before it could get to the edge of the Milky Way. This was how vast space was. With the ancient spacecraft, one would be spending millions of years traveling before they could get to the edge of the galaxy, and humans never lived that long. If it wasn't for the technology of the Slarkovs that had been improved over the thousands of years, the time frame wouldn't have been decreased from millions of years to just a single day. At the moment, the spacecraft was moving at 20 times the speed of light uninterrupted. They would occasionally cut through wormholes and have their journey decreased by up to 20,000 light-years. The extreme jump wormholes didn't need to be used as they were only leaving for the edge of the Milky Way and not somewhere farther. "It's more exhilarating than I expected," Gustav said internally as he looked through some of the small glasses in front of him. He couldn't count the number of times they had penetrated stars, yet they came out unscathed without the star causing any damage to the spacecraft or the spacecraft destroying the star. It was impossible to truly follow the speed of a spacecraft, which was why they were always clad in these black technological spacesuits, which usually helped in increasing their reflexes and sensory ability. If something were to truly ever happen in space, like an emergency with space pirates or any other issue, the spacecraft would have to stop or slow down because Gustav doubted anyone would be able to act with such speed. Gustav was counting down in his mind as they journeyed across space, ready to complete his mission. "The MBO camp, Indrik, were letting you leave in good faith that you were ready to become an officer," one of the instructors voiced out to Indrik in the camp hall. "I am ready, sir. I have completed all training like you wanted me to and passed all the tests," Indrik responded with a respectful tone. "We know that, but in the end you're still a 13-year-old boy, 3 years away from becoming an adult. We need a parental or guardian consent before we can make you a full-fledged officer without having to worry about the laws preventing a minor from working," the instructor voiced out. Indrik instantly thought of his parents, but then he recalled the nasty household situation. They won't be seen as proper guardians since they're currently in the psychiatric ward. "Can I have my brother give the consent?" Indrik asked with a tone of curiosity. "You mean Officer Crimson?" The instructor was a bit surprised as he voiced out. He recalled these two have had serious issues in the past, and Gustav even changed his family name, erasing his Oslov identity, so he wasn't expecting this. "Yes," Indrik answered, "but he is no longer a part of your family," the instructor voiced out. "He can fill in as my guardian. Does it matter?" Indrik stated in response. "Since he is of legal age and has ties to you, then I guess he can. He just has to agree to go through the necessary procedures," the instructor explained. "Leave that to me," Indrik voiced his reply. He was a little bothered, but it was about time he met up with Gustav again, especially since he had messages to convey to him. "All right then. You can leave camp, but don't forget to send me the consent application before next week, or you will be brought back to camp and made to train till you're of legal age," the instructor voiced out before leaving. The lady at one of the counters passed Indrik some clearance data for leaving the camp as well before he headed towards one of the massive mirror pathways within the hall. Indrik should have left camp with the others earlier since he was also a special class candidate and had improved just like the others. Indrik had completed missions on the same level as the others and was ranked amongst the top 10 strongest in their set, even ranked higher than Falco, Timi, Glade, Vera, Ria, Angie, and was said to be on par or more powerful than EE. It was still debatable as to who would win in an all-out fight between Indrik and Eldris, but Indrik being this strong made him worthy of also finishing his training in camp earlier. The only problem was his age, which would be a problem if he didn't get a parent or a guardian to give their final consent to him becoming a full-fledged MBO officer of the law. Right now, Indrik's plan was to get that from Gustav since both parents were currently in the psychiatric ward, and their consent would be invalid. Indrik made a low sigh as he finally headed out of camp. There was still a kind of tension between him and Gustav, even though Gustav was starting to soften up to him little by little. Indrik wanted to use this as a chance to get closer to Gustav and slowly drive away that tension by doing all he could to make sure Gustav trusted him. Will you be passing the vest to him? Indrik asked internally as he arrived within an aircraft. His forehead glowed green a couple of times as he heard a voice respond from within. Not yet. He is still too weak to equip it. The energy of the vest will destroy him at this state. Fusarius spoke. Then when will he be strong enough? Indrik questioned. It won't be very long. He is slowly closing in on that volume of power that will be enough to equip or use some of the items, and when that time finally comes, the world will see a strength unlike they have ever seen before, Fusarius stated. And more than ever they will need this strength to become their protection, because if they were to ever betray the source of this strength, a great catastrophe would be wrought unto the earth and the universe as a whole. Mindaloga's planet swoosh, swoosh. A silver streak cut across a region of red sands as two cloudy dark figures chased after the silver streak. Unlike the multitude of dark figures that had been chasing after this silver streak for over an hour, these two dark cloudy figures were way smaller in comparison. These two were Mindalogas who were elders, and they had finally decided to give chase. They would occasionally send out waves that would blast across the vicinity and wreak havoc. Angie had barely been able to escape the few times they used this attack. So far, she could feel like her mind was getting slower and slower in thinking capability and reaction speed as a whole. Angie knew these two were using a type of ability that would get the better of her if she wasn't careful. Guys, I hope you're done. They're all heading back to the rock right now, Angie voiced through the communication channel. Dash, we got the device. We're trying to outrun the ones on our tail right now, the captain voiced out through the communication channel. Dash, we haven't found the two officers just yet. You guys can head to the checkpoint without us. We'll meet you there, Eldris voiced out this time. I am currently trying to outrun two Mindalogas who are still giving chase, Angie reported through the comms. Dash, how big are they? Co-Captain Davidson questioned. 6 feet tall, Angie said while looking back in the process of running. Dash, you have to get them off your tail as soon as possible. Those are old Mindalogas privy to more powerful abilities. Use your highest speed and outrun them right now, Davidson voiced out with a tone of urgency. I am trying, ugh. Angie groaned while still speeding across the sands. I can't activate my fastest form. Chapter 1027 Breaking Through. I am trying, ugh. Angie groaned while still speeding across the sands. I can't activate my most powerful form, she added with a look of difficulty. Dash, you can't outrun them? I thought you said you were fast? Davidson said with a slightly ridiculing tone. I can, if I activate my fastest form, but it's like I feel a mental barrier stopping me from being able to activate it. I can't move at my fastest speed no matter how hard I try, Angie explained. Dash, it's one of the older one's abilities. Angie, you need to distance yourself further away from them as soon as possible, or you'll weaken and get slower over time, Captain Spark voiced out. How do I do that? I can't outrun them right now, Angie responded with a worried tone. Dash, you have to do something that can help you get further away from them, Eldris spoke this time. Angie turned her head to the side and looked over her right shoulder. The Mindalogas were still chasing after her with the same speed and were only about 20 feet away. Angie turned to look forward and could see that they were approaching an area with rocky-like buildings everywhere. Her eyes squinted as she made a plan in her mind and sped forward. I still have a little spark. I could make use of it here, she said internally as she sped into the air of rocky-like buildings. Fwihii. She leapt forward with her legs outstretched and kicked through a building. Bang! The Mindalogas quickly followed behind her, but the instant they did, a silver-colored energy blast was triggered from within. Boom! It sent forth destructive waves that caused the entire structure to come crashing down along with the structures in the vicinity. The Mindalogas had cloudy-like figures, so they weren't too affected, but this slowed them down a bit, especially with the structure collapsing and causing the air to be covered by red-colored debris. The entire vicinity had become clouded by the red dust everywhere, so this made them lose sight of Angie for a bit, especially with her intense speed. HNNNGHHH. Angie groaned as she sped away from this particular area. Fwihii. She suddenly leapt into the air once more as another horn began growing out of her forehead. This time was a bit different as her legs transformed into a silver-like color with scales all over. From her feet up to her thighs, had expanded in length and claws grew out of her toes. Angie suddenly felt intense power radiating from within as her horn began to glow up along with her pupils. I just reached the echo rank, she noticed internally. Angie now understood the reason for this, her transformation. Bang! The instant she landed on the ground and took a step forward. Zeish! Her body bolted forward with intense speed, sending a blast of shockwaves from her previous position. Fweckish, Angie had never moved this fast in her life, as she crossed over 600,000 feet in an instant. The Mindalogas behind were unable to give chase anymore as this speed was way beyond their limit and how fast Angie had been moving before. Even when they flew higher into the air, they realized she was long gone. Zuunin, on another part of the Mindalogas planet, a vortex opened up and a group of 4 jumped out of it. I think we finally managed to get them off our tail, Co-Captain Davidson voiced out. I made us appear way further from our initial location since you mentioned we could still navigate our way back to the checkpoint even if I didn't know where we would resurface, E voiced out. Guys, this place is a bit. Alevera voiced out as he looked around. They all looked around as well and could see cracks on the ground. Purplish liquid flowed from the south to the north, and it looked like they were on an open ground. The whole place looked a bit eerie. We're in a pit, Alevera stated as she looked around as well. A pit? Davidson voiced with a tone of disbelief as he turned around. There was a very high wall up ahead that reached more than 10,000 feet high. It was very rough-looking and had cracks all across it as well. This wall extended farther towards the left and right. One could see that it kept extending as far as the eyes could see, and at a point, fog could be seen in the distance that made it difficult to tell where the wall ended. We could just climb over this, and the wall doesn't necessarily mean we're in a pit because of how high it is unless it surrounds this entire vicinity, and I don't see it up ahead, Davidson voiced out. Well, I do, Alevera said in response as she turned to stare at him. Davidson's eyes widened as he spotted the horrifying purplish growing eyeball on Alevera's forehead. Where did that come from? He voiced out with a shocked tone. Alevera had pulled off the scarf covering her forehead the moment they arrived here. Alevera's eye ability helped her see through the fog thousands of feet up ahead, so she knows what she's talking about. He voiced out. So we're in a massive pit. Captain Spark voiced out with a slightly troubled tone. Hold on, Davidson voiced out, and checked the holographic screen appearing above the device in his hand. We have to go this way to get to the checkpoint. We're a bit far, but we can get there in a day, so we still have time, he added while pointing at the south. The wall they could see was right in front of them, while they had to move in the direction of the one in the distance, according to Alevera. Should I open a vortex? EE questioned. Nah, it's unpredictable where we will end up spawning unless you want to take us back to the places you've already been, like the target location. Captain Spark didn't have to continue before everyone knew it was a bad idea. Or can you take us to the route we traveled on when we were headed to the target location? Spark questioned. Out of range, EE responded while shaking his head. It turned out it was too far from their previous location, and opening a portal close to the area of the rock structure was a bad idea since the entire place would be crawling with Mindalogas. Skria, a loud screeching sound suddenly reverberated across the vicinity, causing them to be on the alert. We're not alone, Alevera informed them. Mindalogas? EE questioned. No. These are beasts, Alevera said while her eyes squinted. We have to get out of here, Co-Captain Davidson voiced out. Not without getting past them, Alevera said while fully activating her bloodline abilities. In another part of space, Gustav was seated in the spacecraft as he kept counting down. We'll be there in another 30 minutes, Gustav muttered. Your body should be durable enough to withstand part of the temperature, but don't get too close if you don't have to, the system voiced in his head. Sure. I just need to get a sample after all, Gustav stated. Zraire, maybe I should check on Miss Amy one more time before I head to my death, Gustav voiced with a low tone before activating God Eyes. Life Signs Tracking has been activated. He used Life Signs Tracking instantly and picked Miss Amy's life sign. Is she asleep? Gustav wondered as he spotted a smooth pair of thighs blocking his view. He couldn't see properly, but he could spot a little part of arms crossed and knees joined. It seemed like Miss Amy was laying on her knees with her head on her arms that were crossed and her arms balancing on her knees. Surprisingly, Miss Amy was only wearing shorts, so her smooth thighs were on display. Only to Gustav anyways, because he was the only one that could see this. Cough cough, I shouldn't be seeing this, Gustav said internally as he subconsciously closed his eyes. However, with life signs activated, closing his eyes would not stop him from seeing through Miss Amy's forehead region. After staying for a few minutes hoping Miss Amy would wake and look around, Gustav decided to deactivate God Eyes after only seeing her twitch a little. At least she's fine. Cough cough, I should deactivate this now, Gustav decided. Just as he was about to deactivate God Eyes, Miss Amy's thighs began vibrating. At first Gustav was confused as to what was going on, but then Miss Amy woke up at this point. She separated her thighs and stared at the ground. Through this, Gustav was able to figure out that the ground was quaking, which in turn made Miss Amy's body vibrate. What is going on? A landquake? Chapter 1028 Suspicious situation at Miss Amy's locations. She separated her thighs and stared at the ground. Through this, Gustav was able to figure out that the ground was quaking, which in turn made Miss Amy's body vibrate. What is going on? A landquake? Gustav voiced with a tone of confoundment. The ground quaked even more intensely with every passing second, and cracks began to spread out all across the ground. Miss Amy stood to her feet at this point and stretched her hands apart. Despite Gustav being millions of light years away and not knowing where Miss Amy was, he could feel a particularly strange energy exuding from her. The cracks that had formed and spread across thousands of miles slowly began to mend. The ground that split apart in multiple areas began to merge back together slowly. The quaking that was initially becoming intense began to reduce as Miss Amy's hand remained outstretched. How is she doing this? Gustav didn't need to be told before he knew Miss Amy was the one responsible for this mending. He couldn't understand how she was doing this because he knew Miss Amy was unable to perform such a feat initially. In a couple of minutes, the quaking had stopped and the grounds had nearly merged completely. Gustav slowly stared at the sky area as foggy-looking clouds began to pathways. His eyes squinted subconsciously as he could spot a white light extending as the clouds cleared. However, at this same moment, Officer Crimson, "We're here," one of the pilots voiced out, forcing Gustav to deactivate life signs tracking. God Eyes has been deactivated. Gustav's mind reeled back to his current position as his eyes retained their usual glow. "We're here," voiced out. "Yes, sir, we're here," one of the space pilots responded once more. Gustav turned to look through the glassy-like wall of the spacecraft up ahead, and the glows from what he had been seeing all this time with Gradier Xenatus were blinding to the eyes. The white cracks that had connected and spread across a large range of this part in space were even more scarier looking in person. Some of the glowing white cracks were as thick a person in width, while some were very thin, and they stretched across a large expanse of space. Gustav couldn't describe how he felt seeing this, but it was definitely a phenomenal sight. His first time in space for a mission, and it had to be something crazy that had never been seen before. The spacecraft slowed down at this point and Gustav unstrapped himself. His body began floating in the air as it seemed the outer hatch of the spacecraft had been opened. Zing! A cylindrical-shaped metallic-looking item with an handle appeared in his grasp. Gustav held onto this with his left hand and flew backwards with the use of the gravity. He passed through some layers within the spacecraft and doors opened for him and shut after he passed through. In a bit, he had arrived at the final hatch and stood within what was like a small door area. "Open the final hatch," Gustav voiced through the communication system. "All right, Officer Crimson. Good luck," one of the pilots voiced out before an opening sound was heard. TSSSHHHH, Gustav flew forward and finally found himself drifting through space. He could see violet dust in the distance and some stars very, very far away from this particular area. He turned around and finally faced the direction of the cracks. As the energy from the glowing line of cracks spread across the vicinity, Gustav felt like he was in the presence of a higher power. He just couldn't understand why, but now that he was here, he felt a kind of familiarity with this energy. It felt like it was not only powerful but also mixed with an energy he had come into contact with before, but he discarded the thought of it relating with the person that came to mind because he couldn't see how else it connected to that person. Right in front of Gustav's eyes, the cracks began spreading further into space. Where the spacecraft had stationed itself was a safe spot away from the range of effectiveness of the cracks. However, as it began to spread even more, the heat wave hit Gustav, causing the suit on his body to begin smoking. What the fuck? Gustav couldn't help but cuss internally as the suit began to steam. I'm still 92,000 meters away from the point where I can absorb part of the energy into the mini plasma chamber, Gustav muttered underneath his breath. If it was already this hot, then how hot would it be when he got to that point? This was going to be the most dangerous mission Gustav had ever embarked on. He already knew the suit wouldn't hold on to that point, so he began activating some protective bloodlines. TSSHHHSHHHHHH, Iro silk grew out of his body, covering the entire suit like an armor. On top of this, Gustav made use of a temperature bloodline to add frost to the outer covering of his suit, and also made the surroundings around himself cooler. Thri-I-I-A, creaking sounds began to come from the spacecraft. It was quite faint, especially since this was space, but Gustav was able to hear them clearly. You guys might want to move the spacecraft a bit back. It's starting to take damage, Gustav voiced through the communication channel. He didn't want anything to happen on his way back, as he wouldn't like to get stuck here. After the spacecraft moved further backwards, Gustav began to venture forward. Hover has been activated. He flew forward, approaching the cracks as the heat waves spread forth even more. Usually space would be freezing, but in this situation it was the opposite. This part of space was lit up tremendously due to the infinite number of glowing white cracks here. As Gustav traveled forward, he calculated the amount of distance he still needed to scale before he would get to the point where part of the energy could be absorbed. At this point, he was still very far from reaching any of the cracks because despite how large they were, the spacecraft stopped a bit far from them. If it moved any closer, it would have sustained damage, so this was the only option available, and Gustav would have to scale the rest of the distance himself. I need a good angle where I'd be able to penetrate without making contact with any of the cracks. Gustav paused at this point after Hover had been deactivated. God Eyes have been activated. His sight zoomed across several thousand feet in an instant and kept moving further forward. The energy from the cracks were a bit penetrative to his sight despite being so far away, but Gustav didn't back down and kept going further and further ahead. After arriving at a particular area, he looked beyond some of the cracks and could see that there were spaces he could fit in, but there were still issues due to lines still spreading further and blocking within the spaces. Gustav squinted his eyes as he looked from another angle. His current issue now was he was trying to get the right angle at which he could use Lightning Blitz from. With how far Lightning Blitz could take him, he could find himself in a concentrated area of cracks, and making contact with any one of them, according to Gradier Xanatus, would result in annihilation. Lightning Blitz was even more powerful than before, so it would take him beyond the area he needed to be, which was quite dangerous. Either Gustav moved backwards to more than 100,000 meters, so he could be able to use Lightning Blitz and arrive at the exact spot needed to absorb a part of its energy, or he activated Lightning Blitz at the moment and go even further than 100,000 meters beyond the required area. The second option had the danger of him arriving in a concentrated area where contact with the cracks would be made. Gustav decided to pick none of them because the time he would spend heading back, so he could make use of the ability safely, would also be the same amount of time he would spend if he decided to head forward with his usual speed. If I wasn't checking on Miss Amy, I would have told them to stop further away. Gustav noted this as a mistake. However, at this same instant, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. How far away are you guys at the moment? Gustav questioned as he turned around. About 100,000 feet away from your position, sir, one of the pilots answered. It was quite the distance, and Gustav knew he would spend a lot of time trying to get there, but he had a different thought in mind. Go further. Increase our distance by another 300,000 feet, Gustav instructed. Chapter 1029, Absorbing Energy from the Cracks. The pilots had no idea why he asked them to do this, but they obeyed. It only took about a few seconds before they gave Gustav the distance he asked for, since spacecraft were extremely fast. After giving Gustav feedback of the distance they had left, Gustav reached out to his wrist area and began to tap on the surface of a screen. Love. 2. The instant the dimensional bracelet finished counting down, Gustav disappeared from his location. Zing! He reappeared right above the massive spacecraft in the next instant that was more than 400,000 feet away. The instant Gustav arrived on it, a smirk appeared on his face. "It's a good thing I made the spacecraft a checkpoint before EFT," Gustav said internally as he turned to face the direction of the cracks. Once more he was over 800,000 feet away, and this was the precise distance he needed between himself and the cracks. Lightning Blitz has been activated. Gustav instantly turned into a lightning streak that cut across space with intense speed, arriving more than 120 miles away from its initial position. He had crossed all the distance required in an instant and arrived right in front of the cracks. ZZHRRHHHHHH. The instant Gustav reappeared, his entire outer covering, including the suit, was set on intense flames. HNNGHHH. Gustav groaned as everything was disintegrated in barely a second by the intense flames. He pushed the cylinder item in his grasp forward and twisted the top open as quickly as he could. Foom, a strain of energy began to phase into the cylindrical item with intensity, while Gustav had already turned completely naked. Hiya! As the energy was being absorbed, Gustav screamed out intensely, while also activating gravitational emergency container. Zun, 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 zun. Spherical blue orbs began to appear all around him and started absorbing the energy from the heat wave the cracks were bringing. They were getting filled instantly and taking a little bit off the damage Gustav's body would have received, but at the same time, Gustav was barely holding on. He had not expected that it would be this powerful, to the point that his strong body and regeneration couldn't keep up. Gustav decided to use his body as conduit at this point, as the sample of the energy was collected completely. The dimensional bracelet. "It's destroyed," Gustav said internally with a look of regret. His body would burn away, and he wouldn't be able to get the sample out of here if he didn't find a way to heal up a little so he could get away. His body had burnt to the point that he could barely make a move. Tyan, he began absorbing energy from the surroundings at this point to heal up. Gustav was worried about getting overfilled with energy and exploding, which was why he was trying to absorb only a little, but the instant he did, "What are these?" Gustav voiced out with a tone of confusion as he began to see visions. At the same time, Trigaiahe, Thriaiates, the cracks in space began to expand crazily and faster all of a sudden. The heat waves went up several notches in an instant while Gustav was in his trance-like state, seeing visions that shook him to his very core. "Hiya! He screamed out as the energy was becoming unbearable while his flesh was ripping apart and mending at the same pace. The pilots who were on standby with the spaceship almost 200,000 meters away were instantly put on the alert as the ship's alarm system began to go off. "It's expanding. We have to get further away from here." Both of them voiced out with tones of urgency as they spotted the readings of the energy and heat waves approaching. "What of Officer Crimson?" the co-pilot asked with a worried tone. "Look at that," the pilot shouted out as he pointed at the front. Threaths. The cracks were speeding at a tremendous rate, and the ship had began vibrating intensely, and electrical charges were going off within it due to the powerful energy being spread across this part of space. "Do you think anyone would be able to survive that?" the pilot yelled out as he started up the spacecraft. "Let me do a quick scan. He might be on his way back," the co-pilot voiced out while turning on some parts of the engine and tapping some commands in the control room. "Zian, we have to leave now," the pilot yelled out once more as he pushed a button and began navigating the ship. "1 second," the co-pilot yelled out too. At this point, the cracks were closing in on their area and wasn't too distant from them anymore. "Now," the pilot voiced out. A radar could be seen scanning the surroundings of the ship, and in the next instant, it came up with a result saying there was no sign of life range. "He's not there," the co-pilot stated before also playing his part and joined the pilot in navigation. Zuunin, the spacecraft turned around and blasted forward at an insane speed as the cracks arrived at its initial position. Even with the protective shield in place, part of the spacecraft ended up getting fried from the heat wave, but luckily the pilots were able to get away unscathed. They couldn't understand what had just happened, but they were absolutely sure that Gustav couldn't have survived from that. In 1 second, everything seemed normal and the cracks were spreading at a moderate speed, which was the usual speed they were aware of, and in the next instant, it was suddenly spreading at an insane rate. Before they knew what was happening, it had spread across a radius of 100,000 meters in space within seconds. The heat waves had tripled in intensity and things just generally got worse since they were unable to obtain the sample they came for. Deep within the spread of the cracks, Gustav had given out and was losing consciousness at this point. The heat waves had destroyed his body from the outside, and the energy he was absorbing had nearly destroyed him completely from within. His eyelids were close to shutting completely when he spotted something. The Embio Tower, what do you mean by he didn't survive? Did you two wait for him? Did you even check? Gradier Xanatus yelled out with a furious tone as he spoke through a communication channel. Sir, we did. Maybe you should try connecting to his comms, the pilot voiced from the other side. You think I haven't tried that? I can't contact him. There is no readings here and I can't see through the cams that were installed in his suit. All forms of communication has been cut off, Gradier Xanatus stated with a frustrated tone. I think we have to see things for how they are now, sir. What do you mean by that? The situation was a completely unexpected one because when he arrived at the Absorbion point, he was still very much okay, but after what had happened, I doubt he survived, sir. Shut up. He cannot be dead. I am coming there myself. Gradier Xanatus yelled out before cutting the call. He had never looked so mad and disturbed before as he kept pacing around the boardroom for a bit. It's Gustav. He cannot be gone. He's definitely still alive, but he might just need help. Gradier Xanatus recalled that Gustav had managed to slip out of so many dangerous situations and hoped this would be yet another one he survived. I need to get there now. The situation has worsened, Gradier Xanatus voiced as he walked towards the entrance of the boardroom. However, just as he got to the door, another call came in. Gradier Xanatus picked up as he noticed that the call was from the pilots. What is it? He voiced out as their faces appeared in holographic format. Sir, a strange phenomenon is happening right now. Huh? Look at it, sir. The holographic feedback changed and what Gradier Xanatus saw made his face beam with an even more confused look. It's changing color? Gradier Xanatus voiced out. Pretty much, sir, but the gaps in the cracks looks like they're closing up as well. I can see that. It is no longer spreading as well, Gradier Xanatus voiced out. Yes, sir. We decided to head back so we could give a good report of the location after the weird situation when we saw this. The main pilot voiced out. That color, it's starting to emulate the look of Earth's sun. The pilot completed Gradier Xanatus' statement. Gradier Xanatus wasn't sure of saying those out because he felt he might be the only one seeing what this was starting to form, but now he had no doubt that he was seeing correctly. Chapter 1030 Unbelievable Revelations. I am on my way right now, Gradier Xanatus voiced out as he quickly moved out of the boardroom. Darkness. This was all Gustav could see at the moment, and he had no idea how long it had been, but now he was conscious enough to know that this was because his eyes were closed. Gustav slowly opened his eyes, causing his sight to be blinded by brightness, which made him squint them. He slowly adapted to the brightness as his sense of self began to return. As the blurriness died down, he spotted a familiar-looking face right above his. Huh? He voiced out in confusion as he finally realized his head was laying on soft tissue while the rest of his body was on the hard ground. You're finally awake. He heard this familiar feminine voice call out to him, which proved he wasn't dreaming or hallucinating. This also made him realize the soft tissue was actually the lapse belonging to this beautiful figure who had just spoke. He stared at her face and dazzling gray-colored long hair banded together with a look of disbelief before finally opening his mouth. Miss Amy? Gustav voiced out. Oh good, you can speak. I thought you would turn mute, Miss Amy voiced out in response. Gustav jerked up at this point and stared at her with his face still showing a look of intense disbelief. How is this possible? What are you doing here? Where is even here? Gustav voiced out these series of questions as he jumped to his feet. Is this the thank you I get for saving your ass? Miss Amy voiced out. Huh? What even happened? Gustav voiced out with a confused look as he finally turned to look around. His eyes widened even more as he spotted the brownish plain grounds all around them. He looked up and could see white lines in the sky like cracks. However, these white lines were already starting to change color in some areas. What is going on? Where is this? He voiced out one more as a dose of reality hit him. Take deep breaths. First, you were pretty damaged a while ago. Miss Amy voiced out as she also stood to her feet. It was you this whole time? Gustav questioned with a confused tone as he stared at her. Huh, what do you mean? Miss Amy questioned. The whole phenomenon in space, you were the one causing it. All those times I connected to your life sign to check on you. How did I miss this? Gustav voiced out as he connected the dots. It now made sense how this place that used to have low visibility now turned bright exactly around the same period the whole weird phenomenon began. He was never able to see the sky due to Miss Amy's head angle every time, and the last time he checked on her he actually spotted a bit, but he wasn't able to properly check because it was time for him to leave the spacecraft. I don't know what you're talking about, kid, but I'll tell you what I've been up to these past few months, Miss Amy voiced in response. Gustav stood in place with a look of curiosity as Miss Amy began narrating. After I got infected, I destroyed my seal on my way out of Earth to boost my speed. I was close to breaking through to the next rank days before the incident, so in the dangerous process, I actually broke through. Miss Amy paused a bit at this point, and that's when it happened. Miss Amy's mind drifted back to that time. In space, she drifted forward with intense speed, way faster than the speed of light, because she had just broken through to the beacon rank. Due to being in a dangerous state, she was unable to control her speed. At that point, a phenomenon happened where a wormhole was opened, but it was not the usual one the MBO had planted in different parts of space. This one was caused by the surge of energy Miss Amy was exuding as she sped across space. She was unable to control herself in time to stop and ended up flying straight into the wormhole. Unfortunately, she found herself in an unknown dark dimension that was in between time and space. She had no idea where this was, but she wasn't dying anymore from the ashy infection that made Earth and its surroundings unconducive for her. The only problem was, Miss Amy noticed she couldn't breathe because air didn't exist in this place. Herself, Jack, and a few other mixed bloods who were considered the most powerful on Earth were able to travel across galaxies and breathe in space without issues, even though oxygen was not supposed to exist in space. The problem this time was, there was no form of wind at all in this place. Miss Amy could, however, hold her breath for a very long time, so at the moment it wasn't an issue. The first thing she thought of doing was getting out of this dimension that was dark, empty, and in the middle of nowhere. It was like being banished to a place of nothingness. It was lonely, and there was really no signs of life. Miss Amy decided to create something that would help her with the breathing issue instead, since getting out of the place was proving difficult and impossible. The instant she tried to generate power, Miss Amy noticed, her entire core was overflowing with over 100 times more power than before. She couldn't even imagine how powerful she was at the moment, and yet she still couldn't find her way out of here. She suddenly felt the urge to stop holding her breath and did so. This was when Miss Amy realized she didn't need to breathe anymore. She had transcended that aspect of humanity. She tried creating something, and with a single thought it appeared. Hover bike, she voiced, and in an instant a bright light appeared in front of her which turned into an hover bike. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A, and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1031. I created my own planet. Miss Amy proceeded to call out different objects and items, and they all appeared in an instant, proving that she had way more power than she had ever had at this moment. The main problem was still getting out of here, which was in the middle of nowhere, but Miss Amy felt she could spend this time trying to grasp the full extent of her power. In a week, more than 1,000,000 things were floating in this space with her, and most of them had been created instantly. Miss Amy just had to imagine whatever she wanted to create so long as it was a non-living thing, and it would appear. There were skyscrapers floating across the place, small buildings, rocks, appliances, and so many other things. Vanish, Miss Amy voiced out. HZZZZIHHHH, every single thing she created during this time frame suddenly disappeared. My energy is finite, but it is almost infinite. I would never be able to deplete it even if I was to keep creating things for 1 year straight. Miss Amy muttered, but at this point, a thought appeared in her mind. I should try that, she muttered as the picture of a flying creature appeared in her mind. Zin, a bright white light began forming in front of her, and in a few seconds, a dove appeared. It worked, Miss Amy muttered with a look of disbelief as she saw the creature flapping its beautiful wings in front of her. PLA, 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 PLA. It flew around her beautifully and perched on her left shoulder. I can create life? Miss Amy's head was still reeling in shock. She proceeded to touch the creature on her left shoulder gently as it made some bird noises. The place seemed less lonely as the dove brightened the mood up a bit. However, this whole scenario was short-lived as the dove began to make a weird pitched sound. Miss Amy didn't understand what was happening at first till the bird began to flap weakly and began to fall from the air. She grabbed it and finally understood. It's dying, she voiced out. No air. The creature ended up dying after a few more seconds, and Miss Amy allowed it to vanish as well. Zayas. It turned into a white light and phased into Miss Amy's body in the next instant. This didn't happen with the others, so Miss Amy realized that she would only lose a noticeable amount of energy when she created something with life, or something very massive. Miss Amy had another thought at this point and decided to create something that had never been done before by any mixed blood that ever lived. For living things to stay alive, they need an environment that is conducive for them. They need air, they need an ecosystem, sky, and land. As these thoughts appeared in her mind, her eyes turned completely white and her body emitted a powerful discharge of energy. Zinhinzinzinzin. Miss Amy could feel herself losing energy at this point, but she knew exactly what was happening, so she didn't stop it. Out of nowhere, rumbling sounds began to ring out as something was forming underneath her. I started creating my own planet. Miss Amy paused her narration at this point. You created this? Gustav voiced with a surprised tone as he turned to look around. Yes, it wasn't easy and took a lot of time, but I managed to get it done, Miss Amy stated in response. Gustav's mouth was wide open at this point as he looked around. He could see some birds flying in the distance, and due to his perception, he could sense flowing water some distance from here. From what Miss Amy narrated, he knew that the air he was breathing right now was also created by Miss Amy, since this unknown dimension was void of air. It was a crazy situation to fathom altogether, and Gustav was having a hard time taking it all in. Did you finish it yet, though? Gustav questioned. I am not finished yet, but I am done with the size and outlook. Just need to put a few other things in place, Miss Amy responded. So the phenomenon was because you were creating a planet and life within this dimension, and it was expanding at a rate that was ripping the fabric of space apart. Gustav felt everything made sense now as he put things together. It affected the outside world? Miss Amy questioned with a clueless tone. Yes, we were worried something dangerous was happening, Gustav responded, and then proceeded to explain how things had been recently. He told her about the phenomenon in space, which was linked to her planet's creation. Interesting. It started around the same time I started creating a sun, Miss Amy voiced out. You were creating a sun? Gustav stated in shock. A planet cannot exist without a source of light, dummy, Miss Amy stated. The heat wave. The sun she was creating is the true reason behind it. Gustav pieced everything together at this point and turned to stare in a direction. The cracks. They're in the process of forming a sun. We were walking right into a sun. Gustav nearly face-bombed as he spotted the cracks far in the sky that were now changing color and closing the gaps in between. So it turned out I just needed to create a planet and a sun to burn through space and get out of here. Miss Amy chuckled lightly as she also pieced some things together from Gustav's narration. How did you even save me? Gustav questioned. I felt your presence, Miss Amy stated before proceeding to narrate what happened a few hours ago. Air. While Miss Amy was on her planet in the midst of the creation, she heard a yell. The voice sounded too familiar for her to ignore. She turned to stare towards the western sky at this point where the sun was being formed. Thus, she took off into the sky in the next instant. Chapter 1032, I killed him. She turned to stare towards the west sky at this point where the sun was being formed. Thus, she took off into the sky in the next instant and appeared right in the midst of the cracks that still spread on farther than expected. She was unaffected in the slightest by the heat waves, but as she traveled further she noticed the rips in the sky and a part of the area the cracks covered transitioning into a different place. Space. Miss Amy instantly recognized this to be space the further she flew. It was surprising to her because she had no idea the cracks had already breached through space from out of this dimension. She heard the yell once more and stared forward. This was when she spotted a figure holding onto a head-sized cylindrical object while floating in place with their body ripping apart and mending at the same time. Gustav? Miss Amy had a look of shock as she recognized the figure to be Gustav. He can't take any more of this, she noticed and quickly sped forward once more. The moment she arrived in front of him, she noticed he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Pa! Miss Amy snapped her fingers and in the next instant a bright barrier covered the both of them up, shielding him completely from the heat wave. The energy he was absorbing stopped flowing in at this moment and Gustav's eyes finally closed completely as he fell forward. Grab! Miss Amy grabbed hold of him, hugging Gustav to her body. A beautiful smile appeared on her face, which was a very rare scenario. Miss Amy proceeded to stroke his hair softly as she continued holding on to him while they descended from the air. Gustav was a head taller than Miss Amy, but she still managed to hold on to him like he was a baby. She was curious about the whole space issue, but she decided now wasn't the time to check that out and placed Gustav's head on her laps upon landing. She noticed he was badly damaged and most of it was from within, which was the worst form of damage, so Miss Amy began to transmit energy into him from herself. Coupled with his own healing ability, Gustav was able to heal quickly and regained consciousness in 3 hours' time. That is what happened. Miss Amy finished narrating how they got to this point. So you had no idea? You had broken out of this dimension the whole time? Gustav voiced out. Yeah, so how is Earth? Miss Amy questioned with a slightly curious tone. I killed him, Gustav voiced in response like he already knew what Miss Amy was referring to with that question. Oh. A smirk appeared on Miss Amy's face as she heard this. So that bastard is finally dead, eh? Too bad I wasn't able to kill him myself. Did you torture him, though? She proceeded to ask. He did more than that, Gustav responded with a slight chuckle. Tell me all about it. Planet Mindaloga's / Bang, bam, boom. Sounds of explosion and collisions rang out as a battle between a group of mixed bloods and beast was playing out. These beasts had dark mist emitting from their eyes, claws, and skull, but they were physical enough to take damage. There were more than 20 of them ambushing this group of 4, but these 4 were strong enough to hold their own and had been doing well so far in dealing with the beasts. Alevra swerved to the right in mid-air as a 6-legged beast leaped towards her. She spun with her legs stretching out, which in turn slammed into the back of the creature. Bang! Another one was sent crashing down. It slammed into a fellow beast and Alevra went on to fire a destructive beam from her forehead to finish them off. On the other side, conjured up multiple vortexes in front of these creatures, sucking them in and letting them get tossed across the place. Bam! 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 These beasts kept slamming into each other as the vortexes were positioned in a circular format across the place, making it so the beasts were pulled into another vortex the moment they got out of one. He would occasionally attack some using physical combat after incapacitating them with the pulls of the vortexes. Pan de N0, VL the captain on the other side, sent out destructive circular waves with both arms. With every fist he sent out, a wave was blasted across the place that transferred the damage to the other beasts in the vicinity. He could focus on one beast, and other beasts would be getting damage from the attack he was inflicting on the beast. The strange waves made sure to transmit the damage from the attack all across the place. Davidson, on the other hand, had transformed into a gorilla-like creature with golden-colored furs and glowing white eyes. His physical strength had been greatly improved, and he could shoot flames from his mouth. He pounded these beasts from place to place while showering them with flames as well. In a few more minutes the battle ended, and all that could be seen around them were multiple corpses of these beasts. This makes the 7th swarm we've faced, E voiced out. What's wrong, Boy Scout? You running out of energy? Davidson questioned with a slightly ridiculing chuckle as he transformed back into his original form. Far from it. EE responded with an unbothered tone. He dealt with more of the beasts than you did, though. Elevra voiced out as well, causing Davidson's smile to fade. In the battles so far, there wasn't a doubt that Elevra was the most powerful here with the way she was finishing each creature with a single or two attacks. They were quite the power group, but she had even taken care of creatures that attacked from their blind spots while still dealing with the ones in front of her, so Davidson didn't want to get on her bad side. We're close. I can see the wall, Captain Spark voiced out as he looked up ahead. Let's keep moving then. We've been here for too long, Elevra voiced in response. Hold on, since I can see the wall too, I can get us there, E voiced out before conjuring a vortex. Soon, a purplish vortex opened up in front of them, and they proceeded to jump in. In the next instant, everyone arrived before the gigantic wall that was over 10,000 feet tall. We're here, Captain Spark voiced out. There are creatures lurking on the walls. It will be a battle if we're climbing up, Elevra stated as she looked up. Can you get us to the top? Captain Spark inquired as he stared at E. He didn't want them to spend time trying to scale the wall, while also having to battle creatures since they had spent a lot of time in this hole. I can't see the top, but since I know how high the wall is, then yeah. It'll just project my vortex that far, E voiced out before proceeding to open up another vortex. At the same time he did this, a loud beast cry reverberated across the vicinity. That's the strongest creature here. It has noticed us, Elevra voiced out as she turned around. How strong? Davidson questioned. Just get into the vortex, Elevra voiced out before pushing him forward. You go next, Captain Spark voiced out, but before he knew what was happening, Elevra pushed him in as well. At this same time, the sound of beast paws stamping on the ground became increasingly loud, and in the next instant, a gigantic beast about 20 feet large appeared right behind them. Elevra and E were left, but there was barely enough time. Elevra stared at E. Ian was about to push him in when the vortex suddenly turned red. And both of them instantly got sucked in while the creature charged forward as well. Bam! They fell to the ground, which was atop the wall, and the vortex above them hadn't closed up yet. Greyher, a loud creature yell was heard as the head of this gigantic creature poked through the vortex in the next instant. Idiot! E stared at the vortex and stretched out his right hand before clenching it. The vortex closed up in the next instant, and a massive, decapitated head fell to the ground with blood oozing out. No matter how powerful a creature is, they're bound to die with that type of foolishness, E voiced as Elevra gave him a hand and helped in pulling him up. Did you really try to push me in and face it yourself? E voiced with a slight chuckle. If that is what is required to save you, I would do it again, Elevra stated in response without batting an eyelid. Who had always been confident-looking, suddenly turned shy at this moment as he stared at Elevra from behind, who had begun walking away after saying that. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.